Okay, wow, look at this lineup. Everybody get comfortable, everybody, yo, check these guys out. So this is our first panel of the weekend. It's directing and producing AI films, and here we have some of the best directors in the game right now, no joke. So we have Davide, Bianca, who his company is called Shifting Tides. He's an incredibly gifted AI director who's been pretty popular lately. You might have seen some of his stuff. We have Jason Zada from Secret Level, founder of Secret Level, AI director. We have Kavan the Kid, also known as Kavan Cardoza. His company is Phantom X, and he works with the guy sitting next to him, Michael Mitchell. Old friend of mine, we go way back. Both AI directors that work together. And then we have Deepak Chetti, who is a creative advisor to Asteria and also an AI director. These guys are basically all AI directors in the trenches every day making this content. So let's give them a hand. All right, so we're probably not going to get through all of these, but we're gonna try. All right. And then afterwards, by the way, if you guys have any questions, so we're gonna not do a Q&A. We're actually gonna have these guys go into the lounge afterwards, and you can talk to each of them individually, like kind of a fireside chat thing. After this is over, they'll be in the lounge if you guys have any questions for them individually. Okay, so let's jump into this, guys. All right, y'all ready?
Oh yeah.
Okay, AI is so controversial, right? It's so controversial. So how does the role of a director change when working within AI versus traditional filmmaking? Anybody want to jump on that?
Yeah, I'll dive in.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming, by the way. I mean, the role is overall similar. Like, I flew here from a set that was a live-action shoot in Vegas this week. So a lot of the decision process remains the same, and I think the director's job overall, whether that's live action production or whether you're doing AI, your job is to protect tone of the piece. Ultimately, what is the story that we're telling? What frame services that? What action services that? And that's no different from any set. What part of this set needs to be lit in a way that tells the emotional story of these characters? What does the blocking between these characters mean in the emotional state of their thing, and how is that projected into the final film? And I think that part is the reach that we now have as far as set design. Like, I've had the conversation with Kavan where it's like, okay, we can be on Mars now, but is that the best thing for the service of this story? Are we telling this in a personal way that is going to convey the emotion and what we're trying to do? And just, if you have access to everything, I think that the restriction of that to service the actual narrative is the key. And that's something where if what I was doing was a documentary thing in Vegas where it's like virtually no budget, that's a cameraman, a sound man, and a couple people shifting things around in the house.
Protect the vision.
Exactly.
Protect the vision.
I just want to add on to that. I think spot on in terms of this conversation is an interesting one because it comes up a lot. Have done a few viral things over the last few months, as you have as well, and everybody on Twitter goes, directed by, that's bullshit. And you're like, okay, well, let me explain to you what a director does on set. You have to prompt your cameraman, your DP, your cinematographer, to say, hey, I would like the camera here, and I'd like a close-up of this. You have to prompt your wardrobe stylist. You have to prompt everyone on set. That is your job. You're communicating your vision to every single key department head on a set. So to me, when somebody goes, well, I don't understand why you directed this. Well, it's because I've prompted every single detail in this. And it's really this interesting sort of fine line between being a director on a physical set and being a director in front of a computer. Very, very similar. And I don't think most people, especially who are outside of the industry, actually realize that.
Very well said, yeah.
Yeah, I was also going to say, I think a lot of things, too, you look at Anora, which won Best Picture, and the director of that was also the editor. A lot of the people in the AI space, you know, we go outside of just being the director. We're the director, we're the editor, we're the sound designer, the sound mixer. We're having to choose the music. There's so many elements that go into it. And as we continue to bridge the gap between AI and Hollywood by incorporating actual actors into the performances. For instance, in projects we've done, we do the acting. So there's also an element of trying to direct ourselves as actors, which my acting skills are limited, but
Idaho public school level acting.
But thankfully, 11 Labs, helps a lot in that process too. But I think there are elements of the creative decisions that we come with, and as we continue to bridge that gap, especially with future projects and incorporating actors, there'll be another level of directing because you're going to be directing that talent.
I think there's also like a little bit of a fixation on what is AI filmmaking, and I don't really think there's a definition, and if there is one, it's kind of ever evolving. Because like a year ago versus 6 months ago versus what it is today has completely changed. But I think it's more of a methodology and mindset, and it's definitely more like a space where people kind of like experiment with technology in service of story, as opposed to the other way around. And it's going to keep on changing as new tools unlock new possibilities and as new stories get informed by how we use that technology and vice versa. Sure. So.
Yeah, and I would go even as far to say that it's just filmmaking. Like, I don't see a distinction because, I'm coming from the world of visual effects and virtual production. And, we might say it's a subcategory, each of those disciplines, but at the end of the day, like, it's linear content that we're making for audiences. And ultimately, they may decide to categorize it differently, especially those who are against it right now. But we're just telling stories in motion picture. And one thing about directing that I think is, that can really benefit some people is if you're a multi-hyphenate, as been mentioned before, the communication that you're doing, the prompting that you're doing is a lot of times circular, it's to yourself. So it's really sort of, in some ways, the most true expression of your idea that is possible. Especially if you have additional abilities like fine art skills and technical programming and stuff like that.
Yeah, you really get to be in control way more of the final output and the vision because you're having to deal with less people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if I'm grabbing my DP's shoulder or the camera op's shoulder like 10 times in a row, like they're gonna tell me to like back off.
Yeah, it's such a different process, and there are so many processes that are part of the filmmaking process in general. There's development, of the story. There's pre-production, there's production, and then there's post-production, editing, finalizing, all that stuff, and publishing. And so how do you guys see AI affecting kind of those different parts of the process? And do you think one is more affected by AI than the other?
I mean, I'll just say that, one of the things that we always tell our clients, anybody we work with, is that pre-production is the new post-production. So we're able to very early on see exactly what we're going to end up with in the end result. And to me, that's what's really powerful about that as a storyteller is you're like, okay, I could visualize my entire project very early and really look at it, and then it allows you to make those changes very quickly down the process. It's fluid. The whole thing is fluid. And having been, traditional, I guess I was never a real traditional filmmaker, but a traditional filmmaker, the thing is like it's a very rigid, to your point, it's a very rigid process. To make a change way down the line is very expensive and very hard. With AI, it's a much more fluid process.
Yeah, I think I think we broke the whole thing that used to be linear. Like this is where it starts, and this is how it has to go, and this is where it ends. Now it's fully iterative at each middle point. Like you can iterate in pre-production, but then this actually gives you the output of what it would actually look like as a finished shot, and then you can go back to ideation and conception. If you already have in mind a specific blocking of a shot, you can go down to the effects level and understand how this needs to iterate, and then change elements and fine-tune at a granular specificity that was not allowed before.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point, just the level of variations, like especially in the pre-production process and you're working with clients, being able to give them such a multitude of different options that they can select from, and then you can also ideate on and change is incredibly beneficial that you couldn't do before. In the past, like you get, for instance, even just on storyboarding, you get a storyboard, those boards are the boards you're gonna be running from. Now these boards can be changing at every single moment, and you can change the motion at any given time. If there's any last second changes to, like Jason's point, we can make those changes. Whereas like in the past, like for instance, in ads, you never hear of reshoots in ads. So like now there can be reshoots, there can be changes and all that stuff. And you see it, especially, in that space, like the clients love having that extra ability of control. And also, when on the filmmaking side, when you're making a film, you might be working on something and the AI might do something slightly different than what you prompt, and then it generates an idea in your head. So it's like working in conjunction with the AI, and then suddenly you see a whole new path that you can go down, and you're like, oh man, I wouldn't have thought of this otherwise. And to me, it's no different than when you're working with like a DP, and they're like, what if we just light it this way? And you're like, oh yeah, and then you see an entirely different path. So there's
Totally,
a lot of
yeah, I
openings,
definitely
things.
agree with that. Yeah.
But even down to story, like there may be some elements in your frame that just happen to be there that kind of justify or trigger additional ideas or elements of the story, and it starts infusing more and more layers.
Yeah, and I think that just goes towards speaking towards the idea that like it's still organic. Like, and I think a lot of people think it's fixed, like it's inorganic, it's not malleable, but that's completely wrong. The serendipitous nature of filmmaking is still present, like with this technology.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, there's an unpredictability element to AI, right? But there's also an unpredictability element to shooting on location, and the sun goes behind a cloud or whatever. So those happy accidents that happen in filmmaking, traditional filmmaking, are also happening in AI in their own kind of way, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
At a much larger scale.
Yeah, with fingers, yeah. So we're working with AI, right? And we're using AI as a tool, and it's almost like a co-collaborator or a collaborator. So what are the benefits of working with AI as a tool, and what are the challenges of working with AI as a tool?
Yeah, I mean, benefits, I think we've talked a lot about, whether that is the iterative process throughout. Pre-production is production now and is post-production. So we've had the conversation of it's not pre-viz anymore, it's just viz. It's happening right now. This is it. But the constraints that we find is like Kavan and I have collaborated on a lot of projects together along with our partner Sav, and it doesn't go away being an AI director having a specific vision of this exact thing that I want to do. So the aspect of pulling the slot machine 50 times to try and get the exact shot that I have in my head, and altering prompts and working with team members that can help do that as well, is like there's been times on films where Kavan is working on a particular sequence, I'm going through our next scene, and then Sav is coming in and batting cleanup, where it's like, dude, I cannot get this two shot to do what I want. This is what I have in my head. And we have that shorthand of working as a team. We're able to iterate on these things together and create. And so it's adapting new workflows and finding ways to, sure, can you do all of this by yourself in a room? Do that? Absolutely. But a lot of my favorite parts of the filmmaking process was the collaboration, was the community, and that's a great part of seeing so many faces here as well. Is I think that outreach of, sure, we can all do this alone with our laptop in a room somewhere, but I think that the community and the kind of collaboration that can be born out of multiple ideas coming in the same place is still extremely valuable.
Definitely.
I was going to say control. Control on both sides. You have a lot of control because you're doing anything you want to do, but you lack control. And that as a filmmaker, as somebody who has worked in VR, AR, feature film, this, that, all these different things, you have a lot of control usually. AI, you have to relinquish some of that control, and I think it's coming. All the tech companies are working towards better control, but slot machine is a great thing that everybody always brings up, but it's really difficult. Like, I feel like most of our time is spent trying to bend the tools to the way you want to work, because they were developed by technologists, not by filmmakers. So we're taking tools that were developed by technologists and trying to make them work as filmmaker tools in the most obscure ways sometimes, because you're just trying to fake it till you make it to try to get the shot you need.
Yeah, and it's so specific sometimes too, what you need. I remember, because I make AI films, and I remember I was trying to get a character to just shrug his shoulders, just do a shoulder shrug. I tried every program a million times. I pulled the slot machine and it just wouldn't work. So I was like, you know what, I gotta find a creative way around this and just do something else. If it doesn't work in the scene, or you're not getting the tool to do it, then you're like, there's a creative answer for this, and you find it, and it's usually better for it.
Yeah, I was going to say just, you know, to me, like the most beautiful thing about AI is endless creativity. I've always been someone, you know, coming from a traditional film background. I live in grandiose sci-fi ideas, so I was always impressed with my friends who could make a scene where it's about two guys having coffee and it's compelling, because I was always like, yeah, I'm gonna have these two guys having coffee and then somehow an alien spaceship's gonna come in and all that, and I just don't have the budget to do that live action. So once AI became a thing, you realize like, oh wow, any story that I have in my head, I can now go tell. And yeah, we have to live within the limitations of the tools, but we're being able to do things that we never thought possible with very limited to no budgets. And I think that's just so incredible. And the most beautiful thing is we know the tools are going to get better. And 5 years from now, we're probably going to have full control and be able to do anything that we have.
Yeah, we're right at the beginning, the infancy, and it's still incredible.
Yeah.
But I think also, like, compared to 6 months ago, the control that you have today through deep prompting, through, you know, blocking, or even giving it reference images with elements in Clang or things like that is like a game changer. But I think something that's very unique about this form of AI, of filmmaking, is that you're also a creative technologist. So as things come out, the first thing we do is, okay, let's try to break it. Let's try to push it to the limit and see where the sandbox is. And that becomes the limitation, and then you creatively try to circumvent it. So it's like there's also an element of working with the tools as opposed to against them, and instead of being like, okay, this has to be the shot. No, maybe there's another version of the shot that works way better within the limitations that we have.
The one thing I want to add to that it's really interesting is that as a filmmaker, blocking a scene, and how many people here have had to block a scene in real life? Okay, great. So you know, you need coverage. I need to get my two-shot, my wide shot, my over-the-shoulder shot. I need coverage. AI does not let you do coverage. What's really interesting is I think we're seeing a shift right now with a lot of people that have made really pretty good trailers to, okay, now how do we tell stories? Let's do storytelling with this. And in order to tell stories, you need coverage. So all of these tools are leading us down this path. And yes, they're magical. Like right now, what we could do is magic. You know, like we're able to do shit that we could not have done a couple of years ago. And that's magic, but I still think it's that level of filmmaking that needs to be that next frontier.
Yeah, I mean, two people having a conversation over a cup of coffee in AI is actually a lot, to make it interesting. You know, when you're live action and you have great actors, and you have multiple cameras or you're capturing multiple angles with coverage, you get stuff. You get a lot of stuff. You get a lot of good stuff. But with AI, you have to prompt every one of those things specifically to get it. It doesn't just happen out of thin air, like on set. So you have to be a lot more specific. Well, let's move to maybe a more controversial question for a second. How do you see AI filmmaking affecting Hollywood?
I think AI filmmaking, there's a few ways that I look at it. One, I think it'll eventually evolve into its own category when it's an entirely AI film, top to bottom, no different than animation. I also think it'll be hybridized to a degree where the studios are going to use it because, especially on the blockbuster model, it's not a sustainable model to have $200 to $300 million productions. And they're going to look at lowering those costs by implementing AI. And we're already seeing it now. And within a handful of years, especially as the tools continue to develop, we get more control with the tools, we're going to see it fully implemented across the board. And we'll see those budgets go down. But being able to still see stories on the biggest and most grandiose level, like an Avengers-style project.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll pile on that and say it already is affecting Hollywood. Whether that implementation is already happening remains to be seen, and yes, I can tell you for sure some of them are. But the curiosity is there from every major studio, from every independent filmmaker, and like you're saying if we don't have to spend $300 million on a film anymore, maybe studios are going to be taking some chances on what's $10 million get me now. And I think that's an interesting thing of, like, we talk about early 90s cinema all the time and all the incredible voices and directors and original ideas that were coming out of that time. And it's like, my appetite for risk as a studio is going to be much more I'll be pleased a lot more with a $10 million risk versus I miss on $300 million, I don't have a job anymore.
I think one of the interesting things, I mean, we're actually working a lot with Hollywood right now. And one of the things that I've realized is Hollywood is very curious. Hollywood also hates change. They also hate technology. They fought it. Anybody who knows the history of cinema would know that Hollywood did not want sound to be included into movies. They fought it for 3 years. So all that being said, it's going to affect everything, everything. But right now it's a tool. It's visual effects-ish for them. It's going to save us money here. It's going to save us money here. It's going to make us more efficient here. But it's coming. It's going to be those things. You still cannot get. I might be wrong, but an Academy Award-winning performance out of an AI actor. So, there's going to be things that we'll always have to rely upon, or maybe not always. I should never say always, because who knows?
Well, what about an actor doing, basically act one, runway act one or motion capture for your characters?
Golem, I mean, it's like the visual effects industry has been doing this for, a long time. So it's sort of like, and I remember, when Pixar was trying to get its, Academy Award, and everybody was like, well, that's not animation. Why? So it's a complicated story with the Hollywood and the resistance to change. But I think, we're, at least on our end, we're really trying to be that sort of shepherd or, the cause for good to say, don't be scared. Let's work together. Let's figure out these problems.
I think the equivalent of facial capture in a Rococo suit are probably the most imminent examples of how that is going to affect animation, whether it is a 2D, 2.5D, or 3D done in AI. But also, entertainment as a whole, with path tracing as opposed to ray tracing, arguably that's already AI, because really there's only 20% of pixels that are rendered on screen, all the rest is AI interpreted. So in a way, it's already baked into the machine. So all these tools and all these processes are going to start trickling down the VFX pipeline, and I think, as you were saying, there's going to be a category that is kind of maybe its own thing, equivalent to what CG used to be in the early days, but everything else is going to be hybrid, and it really depends on what the story needs. So if it needs real actors against a CG AI-enhanced background, then set extensions are going to be done in AI. There's no reason why you should simulate water for 600 hours for one frame where you can just, you can do it in AI.
Well, that's what I was saying. I think we'll have overall, we have to look at, outside of just this moment now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're definitely going to evolve into a full hybridized process. And those will not be considered AI films. They're just going to be films. But I think, then we'll also have if it's gen from top to bottom, there's never once, then those will probably be its own category. And maybe it'll just be considered animation at that point and not even AI. Who knows? But one thing is for certain, where it's going, there's no way it's not going to be fully implemented. It's just, every time a new thing like this happens that's very big and changes and disrupts the entire space, there's always the resistance in the early days. I think of specifically photography, because another one of my backgrounds is being a photographer. When there was film photography, and then the digital DSLR comes out with Photoshop, all photographers were like, that's not real photography, that's not anything. And now you look at where we're at today, and shooting on film is a very niche thing, and pretty much everyone is on a DSLR, using
it's fully
Photoshop.
integrated.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm excited for is maybe the emphasis goes back to how good is your story. Now
I think it always is.
Yeah, because first of all, I don't think any movie should cost $300 million. I think that's just absurd. And, and there is something of a correlation to the amount of money spent on a film and maybe the quality of the storytelling. So, for me, it's like if there's all these things that a lot of people just take for granted, like aesthetic and visual, but that's the majority of the cost to create something, if that gets abstracted down a little bit lower, then maybe we're spending more time on our scripts and our ideas. And so what we're actually putting out are better stories, too.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it should be story first. But the one thing I just want to add is that hopefully, because I kind of slightly disagree. I mean, I don't want a category for AI films. I would love for it to become invisible. Because we don't I don't see the same argument with people being like, oh my God, I'm not going to go see that movie. It has CG in it. It's like, who cares? You know, it does it have a good story? Were you interested? Was it fun? Was it, you know, all those things. So hopefully AI is, and we always say it's just a tool. You know, it's a powerful tool. It's a tool that changes things, but hopefully it becomes invisible. You know, it just gives us superpowers.
That's what I think, like, when we get to that future point, I think we'll get outside of it being just an AI film, and it'll either be considered, if it's like fully genned, it'll be animation, and then if it's not, and it's used in conjunction with real actors and all that stuff, it'll just be a film.
Yeah, there's hybrids, there's animation. You know, I love animation, and this is the next level of animation. And animators that make anime or whatever are gonna are already starting to use AI, as you said.
Yeah.
You know, so let's talk about tools for a second, right? And workflow, because a lot of people in the audience and watching are probably curious. You know, you guys make some really good-looking stuff about what you use and kind of how you do it. And you don't have to tell us everything. But we want to get sort of a more of an idea about your workflow and the tools you use. But also, the tools are changing so quickly, and there's so many of them. You know, you probably see every week there's like a new AI tool, and you're like, okay, what's this? You know, and so how do you guys keep up with that, and how do you deal with those rapid changes with the software? And just tell us more about kind of your workflow.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this in the green room. It was like, I have very openly had the discussion with everyone about this is my exact workflow right now. 1 month from now, that might be completely outdated, but take it and run with it. I want great things to come from that. And I mean, we can list all of the specific tools. Like, it's like Kavan and I are mid-journey for images, and then we're doing upscalers like Magnific or Arcana, and then taking that into animators like Ray 2 or Kling are really prominent right now, and then taking those into video upscalers like Topaz. And I think overall, those are generally really well-known ones, but keeping up with it, fortunately, between Kavan, myself, and Sav, I have 3 heads that are obsessed with this, that are always talking to each other as like, did you see this thing on Instagram? Did you see this thing on LinkedIn? And building that, again, community around that, where it's like, it makes it a lot easier to track if I'm not genning all day, and then making sure that I do my hour-long of homework on Instagram to make sure I'm keeping up on everything.
Yeah. I would just add that it's exciting in this space to be an adventurer and explorer. So anytime there's a new tool that comes out, dive in, give it a try, because you never know how it could implement, you know, into your workflow. For instance, Sky Reels came out. Now that's in my workflow, and I'm forever, constantly trying every single tool that comes out. Because, and another thing, you know, when you're creating your film, run if you're doing image to video, run your image in every single one. See which one produces the best result for that particular shot, and then, you know, maybe it's like, because each tool right now, I think, does some things better than the others, and so that's a big element to have to where you're finding that, you know, that true workflow.
Yeah, it's true. I do the same thing. I run it through every animation. I'm like, what's the best output? You know, boom, you win. And it's different for each shot sometimes. You know, each are different. So you gotta try a lot of them out, and they are good at different things. And there doesn't seem, maybe I'm wrong, but there doesn't seem yet to be one that like does it all really well. And people like us, we like to toy around with all of them and come up with our own workflow anyways. You know, I think a lot of people, including myself, experience kind of an anxiety when it's like, here's the new tool, you gotta be using this tool, or you're behind already. And you go back to like, yeah, but it's just a moving image. You know, it's an image and I'm moving it. Okay, whatever makes that look the way I want it to look, I don't care. And you don't have to switch constantly. You know, you can stick to what you like. And unless there's like a very big change that comes about that makes things look way better, you know? Yeah. Like 2 years ago, and now way different with the tools, but like month to month, you may not have to keep changing your workflow month to month.
Yeah, I think like, I mean, the key for any of you who, you know, want to be directing and making your own stuff is like, you know, always just remain curious, right? You have to stay ahead of the curve to be at the curve by the time you're ready to do something. And to that end, it's like, you know, with enough effort, you can push a square peg into a round hole, right? And, you know, one of the things that I would also recommend, especially if you have other skills, you know, I come from a background of traditional cinema and virtual production and real-time filmmaking. So the way I generate coverage is I mock up everything in Unreal Engine with accurate sensor sizes and focal lengths. And then I take high-resolution screenshots, even if it's low poly, and that's my image-to-image pipeline. So that gives me consistent environments for coverage across my scenes. But of course, I have that background, right? So I think, calling upon all the skills that you have and maybe even learning some new ones to support what you want to do is super important, because what I don't think we should all hope for, and I mean this truly, is that there's just a one program solution. Because that's just, I don't think that's good for anything. You should have options. You should be pulling in all sorts of other skills that you either develop or you already have, because it's very rare for somebody in the realm of motion picture to sit down with one piece of software end to end and make something, right? Even if you animate a film in Blender, you're going to post up and resolve or whatever, do additional VFX. So I think just approaching it with that same mindset is good. It's like it's a collection of tools that can be used in a bunch of different meaningful and interconnected ways.
I think the curiosity is key here, because as you were saying, you use Unreal Engine, but maybe somebody's not really versatile in that. But now, as of last week, Claude lets you prompt and have Blender in slave mode, and you can now get a previous thing that you can run through Sora in video-to-video conversion. That becomes kind of like the basics for it. But I think it goes down to shot level at some point. There's projects where I've clearly used each and every one of them, knowing that this is the forte for this thing. For instance, that Minimax gives you a little bit of a exaggerated type of performance in characters. So if there's a comedy skit, definitely that's a go-to tool. Whereas if you want more of a cinematic, dramatic type of thing, Kling does wonders, especially in 1.6 or even with the stop motion tactile look. So it's really about keeping an eye for new features and trying to understand what works and what doesn't with your workflow. But it's not really about redefining it and redoing it every other week, because otherwise you'll go insane. I think at a certain point you kind of develop your preferred workflow, and then unless there's something completely revolutionary that comes along that just okay, no, we got to jump on this one. Like when Gen 3 came out, it was.
Well, I was gonna say when Luma Dream Machine came out, because they were kind of first to the punch. It was there was Runway Gen 2, and then when Luma Dream Machine came out, I remember just being like, holy crap! I was like the stuff's actually moving. Moving, not like how it was before.
Slow,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But same thing with the 2D animation. I think Luma still has hands down the best look for anime.
Oh my gosh, Ray 2 on
and
Luma
it's
Ray 2.
it's how the architecture is built, because when you do 2D animation, since there's no light fallout and there's no shadows, other models have a little bit of a harder understanding of what is the depth and how to move them, as opposed to Luma just on point since day one.
My answer is really simple. I love Google VO2. It's the first thing since I played with Midjourney that just blew my mind, to the point of oh my God, it looks like real video. It's not accessible for everybody. It's on a lot of platforms, but it's very expensive, so it's probably not going to be the thing that everyone uses. But I'm still hoping that we still keep building towards these models that look so lifelike that you can't tell the difference between, because there's so many things you look at and you go, yeah, that's AI, that's AI. And I think all of us who are doing this on a daily basis, we want to try to get to the point where it doesn't look like AI, or at least I know we are. It's to the point where, you're trying to get the realism, you're trying to get the best motion, you're trying to get all these things. And, I agree with there's probably not going to be one tool that solves all the problems, but hopefully as we start moving to these sandbox environments, it will have a lot of features. I mean, we're right now with all the tools are sort of copying. One comes out with a cool feature, they all copy it. So it's just getting to be well, okay, this model's slightly different at to Davide's point, slightly better at this and that, but it is moving so fast, and Google VO2 I think is just light years beyond.
And I think to that, to that end, it's it's pipeline, right? Yeah. It's pipeline and workflow, and I'm starting to see, and I think we're all noticing this, more and more startups and companies built around that,
Sure. Yeah.
where they're making a unified framework. So it is a one-stop shop, conceptually, but it is bridging all the APIs from all these other services into one. The Adobe Premiere or After Effects of
I was
whatever
going to
this
say,
is.
essentially, there's a tool called Arcana, which is an image generator tool, but then simultaneously it has in there, Luma, Kling, Minimax, all of the tools right there. So you just kind of get all of your stuff centralized, instead of having to hop around.
Instead of, you don't have 24 browser tabs.
Playbook, Rubber Band, there's tons of them.
I'm still at the 80 browser tabs open, but
Yeah,
You're a purist.
FreePick is similar.
Yeah, that'll take your RAM real quick. Yeah, so do you feel, we have an audience here, we're watching AI films together in this theater setting, which is pretty cool to see it on the big screen with the good sounds. But do you feel like, as we get closer and closer to being able to approach, like, you can't tell the difference, right? And if you can't tell the difference, you'll probably know this film was made with AI somehow. You'll just know. Right? Either they'll tell you or maybe you won't. But do you feel like general audiences are going to accept AI films as the way they've accepted normal films and animated films?
If the story's good, nobody's gonna. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the benchmark that I use is my mom. She's a woman from Idaho that does not care how the thing was made. Ultimately, is this story interesting? Is this compelling? Can I watch this and stay engaged? And does she notice strange artifacting or hallucinations from AI? Sure, she isn't articulating exactly what she sees there in a way that a panel of directors or an audience full of filmmakers will, but I think on a broader sense, the general audience doesn't care. Ultimately, to be completely honest, do they enjoy it?
Totally agree with that. I mean, that's the thing. We did Davide and I worked on the Coca-Cola spot that came out last year, and you realize that the trolls are really loud. They're really loud about how much they hate AI. Hardly noticed. And then the people like. I love the mom thing because my mom called me right after the Coca-Cola thing came out. She goes, I don't understand why people are so mad about this. It looks good to me, because she's not analyzing it frame by frame. So to a normal person, they just go, that looks great, or I don't see the difference. That's like good CG too. You shouldn't notice it. It's just there, so.
Well, and anybody who's watching anything frame by frame isn't actually watching it, right?
Oh, those Twitter people have way too much time on their hands.
But they don't like to hear that if you've engaged, I've already won. That's the thing.
My favorite is when the trolls repost your thing.
I was just about to say that. So like when we did Star Wars, and then Forbes called it like the best thing, like the best Star Wars thing in the last 20 years or something like that. And that got eventually around to Twitter, and they made the anti-AI Twitter people really mad. But in the process of them voicing their disapproval, they kept retweeting it. Yes. And so they just blew the video up even more. We were like, oh, I mean, thanks, this is awesome.
My favorite is a retweet. Oh, this is so horrible. I hate it. Thank you. Thanks for the 10 more views and likes.
It's all PR, right? I mean, it's all publicity.
There's actual data to show that is the case, because in the case of the Coke spot, there's System 1, which is the entity in the UK that does all the rating for the TV spots. Focus group tested it, and they did a scoring system for it, and it scored 5.9 out of 6, and it's like the highest performing Coke spot in the last 15 years, and it had 98% rate of approval from a general consumer. So it's really all the negative backlash could be traced down to industry insiders that are either afraid to embrace the change or haven't figured out how to, factor AI into the pipeline. But the general consumer does not really care. It's
going to go to what everyone's made this point on here. It's your story. If you have a good story, you're going to be able to, essentially, the other thing is, I would say story and sound. You have to have great sound, because you think of if someone makes a, pre-AI, they shot a really low budget film, and it looks like it, but it has a movie quality sound where it sounds no different than any other movie you'll see in the theater. They accept the lower quality video because it sounds like a movie and everything feels natural and the story is good, so they'll be engaged.
That was the Blair Witch Project, actually. They spent so much money on the sound mix for the theater to make it watchable.
Yeah, I mean, curating all these submissions that came in, I think one of the biggest factors was sound design and the quality of the sound design, and also for the music videos, the song. Is it a good song? Is it catchy? Definitely a factor. And the other thing is, a lot of people watch content on their phones nowadays, and it's such a small screen. It's even harder to tell what's AI when you're looking at something on mobile. And a lot of people, I've shown AI content to on mobile. They're just like, oh, that's real, right? And I'm like, no, So let's move on to like costs a little bit and how much money we're saving by using AI. And you guys are working with large corporations and agencies in Hollywood and whatnot. How would you describe the cost reduction or the changes that are going about in budgets right now?
I would love to take that one. Well, okay, I'll just start off by saying that our explanation for cost is usually because we're a company in the industry that's really trying to be a force of change. I think there's a lot of people, when they think of AI, they think of fast and cheap. And we always try to say it makes you more efficient. It's not about cost savings. Sure, maybe you'll get 20% cost. Like if you're going to spend $250,000 on a commercial, maybe it'll be $220, $210. But we try to uphold that it does take a lot of people. It does take a lot of time. I think what I've been seeing, and something I want to hear everybody's opinion on, because I think it's such a crucial time in this industry, as well as just as people that need to make a living. I've seen a lot of, as more studios have popped up and this and that, there's this general race to the bottom. And it's really bad. Everybody will do it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to the point where it's just like, I'm like, are we just trying to price ourselves out of having a future, a career? Because I just don't get it. And I think a lot of that is really this race to the bottom that we all have to recognize. We all have to be a part of changing. And if you could, and that's where it's really different, like one person in their living room versus, 15 people that are employed and they're professionals and they work in the industry are very, very different. But if that one individual is going to say, well, I'll do it for $5,000, it just brings us all down.
Absolutely. I think it's more about how much can you squeeze out of the allocated budget as opposed to how much can you cut. Because it allows you to move faster so that you can produce more content, so that you can reach more people at the speed of culture and make changes so that, it's not only just short or long form, it's also content on social. It's also how you build marketing launch campaigns around movies and games, and how can you, work in parallel while the team is still developing a game and all that type of stuff. But we start talking about 500 now, 300 tomorrow, then the day after is 5, and then it's on, it makes no sense. It doesn't benefit anyone.
Yeah, it's not about, I think, it being cheaper. It's just about, like, the other thing too is now when you're working with a client, they can have more control. They want to change, in the last second, kind of what we've talked about earlier, and they don't do reshoots and ads. Well, now they can. Now it's like, hey, you can make this change. Like, at the last second, they're like, oh, we just wish that was different. You can make that change. But I think it is incredibly important that it's not that like it's this insane like cost effective, takes everything out. I think it's cost effective for you as the individual creator and you want to go tell your stories. Sure. But when we're like doing things in the sense to make sure we create a lifestyle and everyone here in this room can have a career in this space, no, we definitely have to maintain, like how it's always been in that aspect.
100%. I mean, I was fortunate enough that right when I moved to Los Angeles, it was at the turn of film to digital. And there was a very similar change that happened, where there was a lot of smaller commercial shops that were opening up, and the big machine, the big company, weren't the only ones that were gatekeeping that stuff anymore. So there were a lot of opportunities, and there was all of those discussions where it was like, I'm a green as grass PA at this point, but seeing all the directors and producers having these same conversations about the race to the bottom that we're seeing now, where it's like this cheaper alternative is going to pop up, these things are going to happen, and sure, clients, agencies, people that are paying for these things on a commercial standpoint, they absolutely smell blood in the water and want to seize the opportunity to maximize what they can get for as low as possible. But I do think that there's going to be a stabilization eventually of this is half of my day and like half of Kavan's day at this point is client education, to be completely honest. Whereas if I could just sit and gen all day, I would be so happy. But a lot of this is also having a conversation with executives at different ad agencies, with clients directly, just making sure that there's an education where it's like, well, why are there 15 days in for this person working on this project? It's because, well, they're going to work on this for 15 days. That's how this works. People still need to make a living wage.
Still takes a lot of time, a lot of hours, thousands and thousands of hours, and people still don't understand that, I think, in a way.
Well, especially if you're expressing it through the pre-existing pipeline, like for any of these processes, because I think it's like, yeah, lower material costs potentially, but your personnel overhead, you know, anything like that. Like if you're having a person design a shot, like completely on their own, like they're not using Midjourney, they're not using anything like that, and they're going through multiple iterative processes to make sure that they have total control of the frame. I mean, that takes a lot of time. Maybe not as much as it used to, but it's still a significant investment of time and creative energy.
Well said. Well said. I don't have too many other questions. We're kind of coming to the end here, but I guess okay. I'll leave you guys with one question. Maybe we can get it from all of you guys. What do you think? And maybe it's all the same answer. What do you think is the most fundamental thing to creating a great AI film? The ingredient.
It's popped up about 25 times on this panel, and that's AI or real cinema. It always starts with your story. You have to have a compelling, engaging story that wants to be told. And I love all of the unique voices that are going to be coming out of this, because we're going to get a plethora of different perspectives of literally the same event or just the same story, which there's like, that opens a whole nother conversation about subjective reality, which I will totally have with any of you out there. But it always starts with story.
So not to repeat that, because I agree, I would say then sound. Like sound design is so crucially important to the project, and building a world, you know, especially if you, let's say like me, I love sci-fi. I think there's such a fun thing of like getting to create and craft your own unique sounds for that world. So I'll say sound.
I think I have a hot take.
Go for it.
I've heard this from a very traditional filmmaker friend of mine say, I've looked at all these AI films and it just looks like you guys are copying the things that you've seen. And I just think that that's what's really struck me about that, is like we're in this kind of interesting stage of like just emulating the things that we've seen, and the conversation went to the point of, I would love to see people with very strong points of view come out of this. Like, where's the Wes Anderson? Where's the Quentin Tarantino? Like, we have these tools that could do anything. Why are the majority of the things that we see just copies of things that we've already seen? So my only advice, or I don't even know if it's advice, is just like, have a voice, be original, do things that we haven't seen before. Because we have these tools that you can do anything you want, but yet we're not. So
right, it kind of all starts to, like, a lot of the content starts to look the same as other content. It's all
that
like
was his
cyberpunk
critique.
stuff,
Yeah,
you know?
that was his critique. Is that every single thing looks the
yeah,
same.
you can make any worlds you want, and I think the finalists that we're screening at this competition are diverse. They do have voices, and we're trying to find that next Tarantino, you know? The next auteurs, and you guys too are already auteurs of AI cinema.
I think, to your point, just like the mid-'70s gave us the great film school generation, and then the '90s gave us the propaganda generation, I think the next generation of filmmakers is going to come out of this new ecosystem. And I think it's important to kind of develop your signature style. Whether it is a combination of aesthetic, editing, sound, and everything that all these guys have said before, I think having a unique voice and approach to the storytelling is really important. And I think it's one that can actually emerge regardless of the format and the aesthetic. Like you can tell that this person is behind this short or this feature, whether it is animated, whether it is a live action look, whether it is stylized, but there's gotta be that something that makes it you. I think that's very important, because as the access to the tools gets democratized and easier to use them, there's going to be a samey look across the board, and it's very important to kind of develop your own.
On that note, real quick, I just think something that's really interesting is, you know, we are seeing a lot of, you know, people sort of looking at the similar styles that other people have done and this and that. There is this like sort of, I wouldn't say copying that we see within it, but I think as we move to this next this next phase. I think a lot of people that weren't filmmakers jumped in very, very early. They were more technologists. As I'm seeing more and more traditional filmmakers come into this, I'm like, damn, this stuff's getting good. Like, we're now starting to see people who are real storytellers, who know how to work with cameras, know how to work with actors, know how to do this coming in, and it's going to be totally different. And to Davide's point, once everybody can kind of have access to the same high-level tools, it is going to be your point of view as a storyteller.
Yeah, I mean, I'll latch on to that. I think, like, you know, one thing that's really important, especially if you don't have a background in traditional filmmaking, is understanding that this is still cinema. You know, there's 130 years of history. You don't need to, you know, break rules for the purpose of breaking rules. You can adhere to certain rules because subconsciously the audience will latch onto it a lot easier. And the one thing that I don't know if we've mentioned that much, but it's like the last line of defense for any story after you go into production is the edit. And I mean, honestly, I think that is what distinguishes most projects from being successful and unsuccessful in this space. Is I think we take for granted the concept of the edit. And that is, to me, honestly, the most important part of, you know, presenting your story, is how you've actually constructed it beyond the aesthetic, beyond, you know, what even the performances are. You could have the greatest performances in the world, but if it's not edited properly, you know, that's an issue.
And the best auteur filmmakers in traditional filmmaking have their own editing style,
Right.
whether they do it themselves or work with somebody, you know, and that can differentiate them. But I agree, editing right now with AI filmmaking is incredibly important, and it's also where you bring all these elements together.
Absolutely.
All the outputs come together in DaVinci or Premiere or wherever you're editing. Did you have something to tack on?
Yeah, I was just going to say that even if you look at cinema in its early days, it was emulating theater. So, and then it kind of became its own thing. So I think we're in the early days of this as the potential emergence of a new form of storytelling as a whole too. And it really depends on where you want to push it.
And to the editing point, I just want to say something. I didn't realize this because I mostly was like a commercial director. When I went off and did a studio feature film, I kind of fought my producer a little bit on this, but he's like, run 2 cameras, run 3 cameras. And I was like, no, I know exactly what I want. And then I ran 3 cameras, and we're in an edit, and we're like, fuck, this scene is wrong. Scene is wrong. How do we fix it? Running 3 cameras, you cut to that reaction shot where it was supposed to be happy, but now she's sad, and this and that. And you learn so much about how you could transform story in an edit. And I think so many AI, you know, filmmakers or content creators, your whole thing is just to rush it out as fast as possible. I did this in 24 hours. I did this in 2 hours. Take your time. Nobody's rushing you. Take your time. Play with the story. Play with the edit. Wait. Test it. Try to see if you could beat it. I mean, that's where hopefully, you know, most people, even if you aren't filmmakers now, you should be studying filmmaking, and then just sit with it. You don't have to get everything out in 2 hours.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter how long it takes you actually. I mean, in some cases it does if you have a deadline for a client, but if you're making your own film as a hobbyist, as an independent filmmaker, you know, I'm always impressed by you guys, how quickly you get out content. I'm like,
I get up early, Kavan stays up late. There's just a 24-hour shift.
You guys are like robots yourselves.
Usually it's 14, 16-hour days. So we just, you know, we call it the no sleep club. So we just
Yeah,
go
you guys are grinding. You know,
I would say, like, in AI filmmaking in these early days, like, it depends on the project too and what you're doing with that project, because I think, and the purpose of what that project's to be, because, you know, there's 2 ways you can look at it. You can be a filmmaker, and as a filmmaker, I would say take as long as you want. Like, make sure the story's right and do everything correct. But if you're going to be an influencer and that actually is the thing you want to go with, like, you want to move quick and you want content to be out fast. So I think you have to differentiate of, like, what of those avenues you want to do. Because I think about when we did the Batman film and we put that out, like, we had set a hard deadline of December 3rd. It was going to be done that day no matter what. And we put that out, and it did incredibly well. It got shared everywhere, all this stuff. 4 days later, Sora came out. Had we waited, it would have been dead on arrival after Sora came out. So, like, there's an interesting thing in this early days of the space of, like, you're also kind of competing against, like, the new updates of the tools. And it's something, you know, if you, like, take too long and you were making something with a tool 7 months ago, and now you're going to end up putting this project out, let's say 4 months from now, it's visually probably not going to look as good as a lot of other people's stuff. So in the AI space, it is I think, worth taking into consideration how the tools develop.
Well, to that point, though, you said it exactly. What is your goal?
Yeah.
When Google VO2 came out, the holidays just happened. Were starting to happen. We're starting to shut down. And I was like, I need to get something out quick.
Exactly. Yep.
So I did the heist, and that was like just a test. It wasn't a story. It wasn't designed to like try to win an Academy Award. It was just like, I am using this tool. I'm going to test it. So I think there's a big difference between testing tools and putting out content to test tools versus storytelling. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and to that point, is like there's a Western that we're working on, and Kavan is a sensational editor. I'm serviceable, but we were having the conversation with a good friend of ours, multi-Emmy-winning editor, who loves and adores Westerns, and that's something that I've enjoyed in my directing career, live action, is working with people that are specialized at this specific task that I was taught early. Was like, if I surround myself with someone that if I decided to be an editor, he's still a better editor than I would ever be. And so it's still filmmaking. You can still tap into working with those people, with whether that's sound design, whether that's editing. I think that the collaborative nature of these things was like, we've all started in such a place where the tools were moving at a speed and had the ability for us to do these things on our own, but the time from which that a project can live past with, like, we look at things we were doing a year ago, and like obviously those tools are outdated, but the life of an output now it's closer to being serviceable for a much longer time. So that's why we've been having these conversations about, well, let's slow down. Let's cast actors to play these specific roles.
Absolutely,
Let's get
I
these
agree with
things
you. I
going.
think casting
So-
is one of the most important elements too. For my project, it took me 4 months to cast the right. I can call them voice actors, but they're also the facial actors and the references. It took me a long time to get those right people, and it's important. And the cool thing is that at the end of the film, when you use real people, you can put their names on the screen, and they start to become popular. And anyways, that's a whole other thing. But we got to wrap this up. Thank you guys so much. Why don't you give a big hand to all our directors?
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How we doing today, huh? Test, test. We've made it to the afternoon. Y'all enjoy this morning so far? How's that documentary screening? Yeah. Please, round of applause for the creators. Aren't they amazing? Our finalists were so amazing this year. Just the first year, and we're so excited for the energy and the community that's coming together. I'm Aaron Sanchez. I'm the executive director. It's my pleasure to be here on stage with this amazing cast of leaders and investors and creators and organizers. We're going to talk about the distribution and monetization of AI filmmaking. This is something that you probably have been thinking about a lot, especially if you're a creator yourself who would like to explore a career in filmmaking. And you're trying to figure out how do you even navigate this space in terms of making a living with this kind of content, right? So we're going to dive into the economics of AI filmmaking. And so I want to hand over to each panelist here to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do. Why don't we just go in order here?
Awesome. Hey, everyone. My name is John Flynn. I lead AI for media entertainment at Google. So I spend most of my day interfacing with creatives and technologists, and sometimes they are actually the same person. So very interested to get into some of these questions.
Hey, everybody. My name is Fernandes, venture capital investor. Background on our fund, we're a global deep tech venture capital fund, early investor, and some of the largest investors are now over 25 unicorns and 20+ multi-billion-dollar exits. The kind of key thing I think my interest for this particular panel is we spend a lot of time thinking about all the various business models for commercializing every topic, particularly the future innovation around AI itself and content. And so one that we have a handful of companies already in this space, but constantly looking at kind of what is the next evolution and innovation on business models.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm CEO of Hicksfield AI. I have been researching how AI applies for social media content creation over the last 10 years, and definitely we constantly saw all over again that monetization for creators is the main driver of success for social media networks. And I'm really excited to discuss with this group how this is going to change in the era of AI native content.
I'm Chris First. I'm a creator on X. I do AI video, photos, stuff like that. I run one of the largest AI communities on X with over 180,000 members. So I've been doing that for about 6-7 months, just growing my own platform through that and just seeing where AI filmmaking takes me. So I'm really excited for this panel as well.
Hey everyone, my name is Todd Terrazzas. I've been building an AI community in Los Angeles for over 9 years. It's called AILA. So I call myself a professional nerd herder. But yeah, so I've been building AILA for over 9 years. It's 23,000 members. We do a huge conference called AI on the Lot. It's in May. This will be our 3rd annual event, focusing on helping educate, upskill and educate the industry, the Hollywood industry, or really media entertainment industry about AI and how it's impacting the below the line and above the line. And then in the last 2 years, I started a new company called Fabric, where we're really envisioning and developing the future studio system, the studio system of the future. That's AI first. So we advise early stage startups that are in the media entertainment space. We consult with the major studios on their AI strategy, content workflows, and also tool assessments. And then we build community through competition. So we do AI filmmaking competitions, and we do hackathons focusing on developing out new workflows with companies like Luma Labs. And so excited about this conversation today.
Hell yeah. So round of applause, please, for all of our panelists. And you mentioned being a professional nerd herder. John and I were talking in the back how this is finally the time where the nerds get to come out and play, right? It's an exciting time. It's sort of an intersection of the art and technology, and that's going to change things. But the change doesn't have to be a negative thing. I think one of the things we'll dive into today is how the industry is reacting to it. But first, let's talk about the consumer interest in general for this content. I'll kind of point this one to you, Chris, first, and Todd, and then we'll jump in with some others. But sort of, from a creative perspective, like what kind of AI-generated films or content are getting the most attention today, and how might that change in the future? And do these trends vary by culture, genre, duration?
So for me, I do a very diverse range of content. I'm not really making one specific type of video or any type of content. I'm just making whatever really comes to my mind or whatever I really feel like creating. It's really all about the algorithm. You never know what video is going to go viral or give you a ton of views. I'll make a video on Instagram and it could do 2 million views on Instagram, and I upload that same video to YouTube or TikTok and it might do 2,000 views. So you never really know what video is going to go viral. It's not necessarily anything specific. It just, sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't. I keep creating content, and sometimes it resonates with people and sometimes it doesn't. I just create anything that really comes to my mind. One of the videos I showed earlier was a AI video of a UFO flying over New York City. And that's a 6-second long video. Yeah. And that video did end up doing 2 million views. And then I ended up doing another video that was based on Fallout, the video game Fallout World. I don't know if anyone saw it, but it was a recreation or imagining of a video game set in the Fallout universe that was a global Fallout game. And that video was about 3 minutes long, and it did, same 3 million views on X. But it's really just luck of the draw and being at the right place at the right time and just consistently putting out content. If you're not putting out content pretty consistently, you'll get deboosted in those algorithms. And yeah, just keep it posting, but don't force yourself to make something you don't want to create. You'll get stuck in that loop where you're like, oh, I don't know what to make right now. Don't bully yourself, because everybody's in that moment sometimes. Some people can create every day, and some people don't have that idea every day. Sometimes I don't have an idea for a week, and just find the time to make something. And when it comes to you,
Todd, how would you summarize that sort of? If you had to put a word to it or describe what it is that somehow goes viral. These short clips sometimes just catch on. Or maybe Chris, you have a summary for that.
Yeah. So when I did that video of the UFO, I didn't have any audio on my clip, and I uploaded. I was like, oh crap! I was like, I gotta re-upload that. I gotta take it down because there's no music. It's not gonna do anything. It was late at night. I was like, you know what? I'll leave it. And I woke up in the morning. It was like 400,000 views. I was like,
yeah.
And you'd think like, oh, there's no audio. That's gonna do no views. And the video that I think is gonna do 1 million views, I'm like, this is the best video ever. It gets nothing. It gets a few thousand. And you beats yourself up sometimes, but it's okay. It's not every video is gonna blow up, even if you think it should.
Just keep putting stuff out there. You never know what's gonna catch.
100%.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different types of content. We've talked before on education content. This is a very ripe area because education, digital content has the potential to democratize education in a strong way. Wondering, Skyler, and what types of AI educational content have proven successful for monetization, and how does this vary across subject areas and segments, especially what you've seen through Venture University, and maybe some of the workshop and some of the presentations that you've been building for the past few years.
Yeah, I think the monetization, on the education side is quite interesting. The world of education that exists today, you have the aspect of learning live versus learning from something that's effectively recorded. And there's kind of this new third option that's now being developed in terms of the kind of generative AI play, where you can take all the content that a professor has taught. So for example, at Venture University, we have a master class that's now been taught 46 times. And while the slides have kind of improved over the last 7 years, it's the same 300 slides taught 46 times, where we have the transcript of every single time it's been taught. We have the recordings of all the questions that have been asked by the students, and you have this ability to have a generative AI education experience where students can ask questions on demand and get answers from something what the professor probably would have answered. So this kind of interesting new aspect of time, and when you think about kind of new dimensions of commerce, again, you have like the live way of learning something, where you got to pay and show up Monday through Friday to learn something, versus on demand. But there's this kind of new version of on demand, which is much more personalized and augmented with the future of AI. And so I think the leaders that will go with the future of education is who has access to the most amount of educational content. And the deepest content to be able to find the most enriched content overall. And it ties to that, like with Venture University side, we recently, we haven't made it public yet, but we put together a digital twin of myself that has a large number of proprietary data set where anybody at any time can ask me questions about how to do venture capital, how to be a startup founder. And I think that's going to grow into where education kind of becomes this world of mentorship, of kind of experts, and whether the expert is of a specific individual or it's kind of this generalized expert. If you took like all of the top 50 VCs and took their genius into one personal, expert VC person that you could ever, pitch and get feedback from. So this idea of kind of the mentor verse, I think is another interesting part that'll be commercialized, where everyone is probably an expert in something and can kind of have that own siloed, way of monetizing individual experts, but as well as the general data on a particular topic.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. You said something which is key there. You said the word personalization, right? So people learn differently than other people. And having the ability to have a educational tool adapt to the learner versus having the learner adapt to that educational tool is a critical component in making education democratizing education for everyone in your audience. And generative AI gives you the ability to do that through video, through audio, through text, but it meets the learner where they are. And that transcends into different categories that we will touch on today. But I think the point that you raised there is absolutely critical, right? Because yes, it lends itself to multiple monetization events through a single quote unquote block of content, but you're personalizing for each and every person. And I think the value of that, especially in education, is cannot be shouted out enough.
Yeah, one thing I just would add on to that too, for the personalization point, one of the things that we're looking at right now for the universities is taking content that a lot of it traditionally is in English and being able to use kind of dub it with the audio is now in kind of any language you can think of. We recently opened up an office in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and I've been there the last 3 quarters, and I've been amazed that only about 1 to 3% of like all of Brazil speaks English. And the idea that you can then open up content to be a larger and larger market, where you have a lot of courses from like Stanford, MIT, Harvard that are publicly available for free, but they're right now just in English. And so using AI to dub that in other languages is also a way to personalize it and open it up.
Yes, spot on. I think as well, but how disconcerting is it when you're watching my lips move, but a different language is coming out? There's a disconnect there, right? So you don't feel like, all right, well, maybe I shouldn't watch this clown. I should just listen to it, right? So having generative AI have the ability to do reanimation of lips to match the actual language that's coming out, it breaks down that barrier of, oh, this is just something that doesn't feel right. And it further entices the learner to lean in a little bit more because it appears more natural.
Definitely. I was going to say, like, on the topic of education, what's the future of apprenticeship look like, you think? Because if you think about how like AI right now is going to allow us to like level the playing field, then like how, if you're going to go study law, and then the AI is kind of doing all the dirty work for you, like how do you see apprenticeship really like evolving over time, especially when everyone has an expert in their pocket?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. And it wasn't a prepared question, so I like that actually. The fact of that's a very creative question. So we created one of the world's leading apprenticeship programs. So that's actually a good question for us. So the world of education, I think overall is transforming, where most educational institutions right now, 80-90% is just learning by taking classes. Our version of the future of education is that it's significantly more weighted towards the apprenticeship side of things, where you're learning by doing. And that was the whole purpose of why we actually created Venture University to begin with, where you spend 70-80% of your time doing and 25% in the academic world. So I think you're right. I think the fact is that you're going to have more and more of these expert AI tools that help kind of support the learning function, but nothing kind of beats the actual doing function. So creating more environments where individuals can actually do the job. It's also, and I think it begs a bigger, more philosophical question too, which is the big reason of how people think about like their own purpose of life is often the work that they do. And as that kind of starts becoming more and more automated, I think an identification of what purpose is for everyone's life will also be a big challenge. And so I think the apprenticeship piece of creating meaningful work for everyone is something that needs to be inspired. But there needs to be more apprenticeship schools, I think, beyond just the academic learning.
Yeah, one more point.
Yeah, maybe I really love the point about learning by doing. I mean, based on my experience, the best software engineers whom I know, they actually were driven not by like academic pressure. They were not pushed by like the grades. They were just exploring the recent trends. They were trying to reproduce some software systems and so on. And I think there is a great, and now the, let's say, video creation gets sort of democratized as well. And I hope that we will see the same compounding effect in video creation as we do already have in software. So in software, we have a lot of open source systems. People can go and like maybe the community of hundreds of thousands of engineers improve one platform, one, let's say, database, day by day, a little by little, but then this huge group of contributors, they make better progress than large organizations. I can imagine the same could happen with video. When the video process creation gets commoditized, and basically you can look at like the best videos and really deconstruct prompt by prompt or Comfy UI workflow by Comfy UI workflow or something like that, and just be able to improve upon already successful projects and really learn by doing this.
You know, we've been talking at the Austin Film Festival about an institute where we can sort of merge the communities of filmmaking and the technology, teach the technologists to tell stories, teach the filmmaker to use technology, kind of connecting those two. And I think what I'm taking from this education topic is, democratize it, use it in a distributed manner, leverage that apprenticeship. But I think it's way more scalable if you can, just leverage the social networks and all of the other digital networks. So, in monetizing all of this content, One of the biggest concerns of the industry, but that also will be important for independent filmmakers, will be IP rights and how we handle copyright. Right. So I want to make sure to for sure cover this topic. I want to start with you, Todd, because we talked a little bit about this before. What strategies should filmmakers adopt to navigate intellectual property rights, complexities associated with generative AI tools, ensuring clear ownership and avoiding infringement risks?
Yeah, so I have friends that has anyone here seen the T2 remake, Terminator 2 remake in any way? Anyways, it's a fun, long, but fun video to watch. So basically it was a collective of like 30 different artists from around the world where they were all given a certain segment of this feature film to go reproduce using AI in their own unique way. And by going down that path, they talked to a lot of different IP lawyers about how to do it the right way. And so they did that project, and right now they're working on their second version of that, which is with the Alice in Wonderland IP, because now it's in the public domain. And so what they told me about what they really focus on is documentation. What I really believe is like behind the scenes BTS for anything, any of these types of like AI derivative artwork, I think it's even more valuable than the art itself because it gets to show off your process. And so if you really want to, as things still are still being developed within the court systems about what is copyrightable and what's not, I really believe that you really have to start documenting all your prompts, documenting your usage of all the tools, so you can really show the human in the loop, like how you were actually utilizing these tools across an entire body of work, so that if you do want to copyright it or you do want to claim some type of IP, you can show your work, right? It's just doing your homework. And so I feel like, yeah, definitely just making sure that you're documenting everything, all the processes. Another good trick is also that, so say if you want to create an animated character, instead of first going to Midjourney and taking a character out of that, do some hand drawings. Drew some, basic hand drawings, upload that to your into your computer, and then maybe you develop a custom Laura using Flux or something, or you can use any of these other off-the-shelf type AI models to kind of fill in that line art and then animate it in some meaningful way. And I think the more you can play with traditional artistic techniques and then mashing them together with the new AI tools, the more fun you're going to have, I feel. And I think out of that fun and that process, you'll probably get to a more original idea that you actually will have ownership in. And so I feel like...
Has everyone heard of the recent U.S. Patent Office or Copyright Office announcement, right? So basically, AI-generated content is copyrightable. You just have to prove there's enough human authorship, right? And so documenting that, having some sort of breadcrumbs of the process is going to be necessary. And it also has the added benefit that, all of this fear around AI replacing jobs is because you really miss out on the whole process when it gets abstracted out by the media or in the general public. And so just being able to show really just how involved it really still is in the background to produce these films. All right, I think that'll go a long way to improve the community and the space.
I was just going to say about that. Yeah, if you generate an image that's text to image, that is not copyrightable, basically. Just a simple text to image, you cannot claim ownership over that. But I did a video where I generated something with Midjourney. I upscaled it with Leonardo, then I turned that image into a video, and then I also did some VFX works with it. And then I combined that into a timeline of 25 different clips. Now that has become enough human interaction to then claim ownership over it. But if you're just doing simple text to image, you cannot claim ownership, or I think it also for text to video as well.
I say we're an investor in OpenAI. I know there was the news just in the last few days about enabling OpenAI from a U.S. government perspective to start being able to train on more copyright and information. I think the future on this is going to be interesting. It got me thinking when you were talking about the IPing of content. About a year ago, I remember there was a platform that launched where it took like every South Park episode that had ever been done, and it could recreate a very new creative South Park episode, and it got me thinking about there's the difference between personalized content versus what everyone's watching. And while you could kind of create your own South Park episode based on some story that you come up with, if you just watch it by yourself, It's a personalized experience, and part of the enjoyment of content when you have it widespread is that everyone watched the same episode, and that you have something to talk about afterwards. But it's an interesting point about commercializing personalized content versus commercializing content that is designed for everyone to watch together.
Yeah, so we were talking about some of this before, right? This one-to-one relationship with certain content, one-to-many. There's this type of idea where it's kind of a sort of choose-your-own-adventure content where, as you engage with the content, the generative portion is figuring itself out and coming up with a completely new narrative or new engagement. But that is almost hyper-personalized. And so, how do you monetize that as opposed to this shared story model where, lots of people can have that water cooler conversation? I think, Todd, you mentioned that before. I think there was a consensus. There was a clear benefit to having the one-to-many model on the monetization side.
Yeah, I think the one-to-many is what we're used to, right? We're used to sitting in a chair and watching a screen and something's being fed to you, right? Regardless of what that content is, it's designed for everybody, right? And everyone who likes that genre, or that actor, or that medium. That one-to-one, it becomes personable and it becomes interesting, but if you think about it from content creation, it becomes never-ending, right? So you have a job that never quits. You have a script that never is actually completed. You have a series that is never done. And whereas that may be beneficial for some people, it certainly isn't sustainable from a monetization perspective, because the money it takes to give every single one of you in this room the ability to tell me what I'm going to tell you next is prohibitive, right? So having this one-to-many is the format that we have become used to. It is the format that we understand how to monetize, and we understand how to monetize it well, and different elements in that. I think that one-to-one, to your point, I can create my South Park or I can create my Simpsons thing. You kind of do it once, twice, and then you kind of peter out. It doesn't really do it, right? The beautiful thing about content and the talent on this and in this room is that you have the ability to tell a story that other people want to hear, not just another person wants to hear. Right? It's another group of people want to hear that. So don't take that away from them. Give them the ability to enjoy it in the way that they want to enjoy it, from a format perspective or from a medium perspective. But don't take away the fact that we all want to sit down and listen to a story. And again, if you're looking for monetization, that is still the true and tested path, is that one-to-many.
Actually, one thing that was interesting, about 6 months ago, I was talking with some of the leaders kind of in the future of generative AI. And they're definitely like mentally a few years ahead of even what the conversations are that most people are having. And one of the interesting takeaways was, with the rise of OpenAI and other platforms like that, is we're all kind of very amazed right now by just getting to the conclusion. If you say like, design a brand and a logo and a name for a new company concept. Content can get created and give you the conclusion within seconds. But the real interesting thing is going in the future to actually bring someone through the whole process, where you can say, hey, it would actually be interesting if you had like 5 expert brand creators and design creators and company concept creators, and you actually got to see the journey of them having the conversation, so you actually understand why that name, logo, and tagline is actually so freaking genius. But you wouldn't understand that until you went through the journey of actually watching that get developed. And so this idea of, again, also I think monetization of process versus just seeing the final conclusion is another interesting element that for me was a little bit of an epiphany about where we're going, where I think we're going to move away maybe over the next 5-10 years, where it's not just about the conclusion of the content, but the process and how it was made.
Well, I think that you and I were talking about it. It's the creative tension that comes from having multiple people involved in a creative process, right? So if you think about generative AI created content, and let's just say a movie, for example, and it's like a movie, like your UFO flying over New York City. That's you, right? And it's amazing. It got you 2 million views in that. But if you think about the way that it would have been done traditionally, there's going to be someone who's going to write words on a piece of paper. And then someone's going to take those words and create them into an image. And there may not be 100% agreement there that creates that creative tension that strives for something different and something better. Then someone's going to direct that and going to put that down on cellular, to put that down on digital. And there's not going to be consensus there. It creates more tension. And then someone's going to edit that. And it goes on and on and on, right? To your point of having 5 experts in there, that creative tension has the ability to completely blow up. But more often than not, as we've seen in this entire industry, it just creates something magical, right? Because I can create a logo, I can create a business plan, I can create a pretty damn good executive summary on ChatGPT, or Gemini, I should say, sorry. And it's going to look pretty dope, right? But it's me. And I'm going to love it. I'm going to show it to someone. They're going to go, what the hell is this? Right? But if you had 5 people doing it, to your point, then it starts to get creative. Then it starts to get actually valuable at that point.
It kind of reminds me of explainable AI, this concept back before generative, where if you wanted to pitch a AI use case to a client, they would say, okay, how did AI come up with this answer? And if you couldn't explain it, they wouldn't trust it. They wouldn't understand what actually went into it. And so there's this idea of a trust associated to the content that's coming out and that finality of it. And where's the real value if I'm not learning anything and if I'm just taking that end thing? I was going to save this for later, but it's, I think, a very relevant still here. This concept of digital twins, Skyler, you mentioned earlier, right? That kind of can have multiple of these kinds of experiences. How would they work as a one-to-many, or how can digital twins be used in a sort of a scalable way?
Yeah, I think we've been experimenting now with kind of digital twins for the last few years. We've even tried to incubate a few companies internally. I think when I think about where we're sitting right now and where I think the general public will be probably maybe 3-5 years from now, is I do think that there's a real situation where everyone effectively has their own digital twin. They might not know it yet, but I think there's significant value in taking your existence from this moment forward and having it being recorded in some fashion, whether it's video or audio or in text, to where you can reference things that happened in the past. Meetings that you had. We already have a pretty wide adoption happening already in the note-taking applications and Zoom meetings and Google Hangout meetings. And so I think this world of where everyone effectively will have a digital twin for their own personal use, just for kind of whether you want to share it with your children or grandchildren in the future. It's like having Superman being able to talk to their dad in the hologram. But the question is whether you monetize that. Yeah. And I think where the question is there anything worthwhile of your existence that can actually be monetized? Some people have more interesting lives than others. That's probably where the more interesting insights that comes from it. My personal digital twin, looks like me, sounds like me, and I continue to add more primary, proprietary data to it. So you can have a conversation with me about anything, and it'll give you referencing of things that I would actually say or things that are real to my own life and experience. And I think that'll be monetized by who is deemed as an expert, but it'll also just have personal use of being monetized for you individually.
So maybe that's like a many-to-many, because you have your digital twins interacting with each other.
Yeah, actually, it's an interesting point that we do actually, we do believe probably in about 5 years from now, we are going to have startup founders that are pitching us with their digital twins, meeting with our digital twin for like a first meeting, and you take kind of like unstructured data of everyone's pitch deck and put it into a structured database, and then we'll decide if we actually want to meet each other in person afterwards. That could also work for dating, where you kind of do a digital twin meeting and see if you like each other, and then go on the actual date.
It's crazy. 11 Labs had a hackathon a couple weeks ago, and one of the projects was a voice bot detecting another voice bot, and it's like, oh wait, can we switch to our language, whatever the new language was? Yeah. And then they could speak faster to each other, and if you're listening as a human, right, you're like, what the heck is this? But I feel like it's interesting to think about two voice bots or digital twins, whatever, talking to each other in a totally new, novel language that's just for them, so that they can get more transactions done in a more efficient time.
I think the key word there is efficiency, right? Which is what AI is really all about, right? It's doing what we know or what we tell it to do, but doing it far more efficiently than we're able to do it, and then find ways to do it even more efficiently without us instructing it, because it allows us then to go on and create and do all the wonderful things that we do that is intrinsically human, and get all the raw stuff out of the way.
Yeah, and we mentioned that some will be more successful than others. I think that's a point too, how the human in the loop here is still a critical role. Like it's these agents will just amplify your inherent capability, and so you need to still be good at things. Like you want to still develop who you are and what you can do, and the talent is going to be a big factor there.
I was going to say, this is a piggyback on that comment. It's like in a world that's going to be filled with more and more synthetic media. Like for the rest of our, right, we're in the early days of like this AI revolution, right? So just imagine in 5 years or whatever, like how much AI content will be filling our timelines, in our apps and everything. And so I feel like really figuring out if you're a storyteller, right? If you're going to be creating art, if that is your passion, how are you going to stand out from all of this stuff that's going to just look, this rot, the AI rot they call it, right? And I think that's really what's going to, you have to dig deep into your soul, right? And dig deep into what makes you unique and the stories that you want to tell. And these are just tools, right? AI are just tools where it should help you get your crazy ideas out there to the world, to get feedback and to be able to have this, more better relationship with your audience, whether it's like a group of your friends that then spawns into a bunch of strangers on the internet that just start interacting with your, weird videos of like, aliens, in New York. But I think it's like interesting about thinking more about the human touch on everything we do. Yes, we're using these interesting AI tools, but how are you bringing your human creativity and what makes you special to the table, so that, again, you stand out from the crowd? Because, again, like, it's crazy to think that, there's these certain apps out there that would just be like AI, purely generative films, and they exist, of course, they're out there. But what gets me more excited is about thinking about the hybrid, right? You're an indie filmmaker, you've got a shoestring budget. I want to use real human performances. I want to use real locations when I can. But there's a lot of shots I probably can't do, like that crazy crane shot or that flyby shot or whatever, all those establishing B-roll shots. Those are great examples for using AI. But getting those real human performances, I believe, should still be real humans, even though we will be going into a world of digital twins.
Speaking about synthetic media on platforms, I mean, if you go on Facebook now, I don't know if anyone really uses Facebook, but I'll go on Facebook and I'll see so much AI slop, as people call it. I mean, it's almost the same as brain rot. It's not necessarily AI is bad. It's just you go on Facebook and you see a grandmother and it says, oh, it's my 105th birthday. Please wish me happy birthday. Much love. And it's literally just the crudest AI image ever. Same thing with brain rot content. There's going to be slop in the mix of everything. And you can see these platforms getting taken over by this type of like low-level generative content, but mixing in that real human aspect. Me and Todd met in Adobe in January with Paul Trillo, and he was showing his AI film he was working on, where he incorporates real human video and a mix of AI blend through Comfy UI and other tools, and you could see that cinematic aspect brought to life. And it's not just a text-to-video, which I'm not saying I make my videos are text-to-video or image-to-video. I'm not as talented as Paul. I said when I went there, I was like, oh, I really hope they show my video at Adobe. And then I saw Paul do his video. I said, oh my God, I hope they don't show my video at Adobe. I was like, this guy is so much better than me. It's incredible. But it's the blend of cinematic and using his real human talent and blending these tools into his workflow.
Yeah, that Coco film, it just came out. Now it's public. We'll find it later. But yeah, it was like a team of 25 people. But because it talked about how AI was used, unless you saw the behind the scenes, which he did, which was phenomenal, you would think, oh my God, this whole like psychedelic, it was like a DMT trip. It's like, holy shit, this must be all AI. But no, go watch the behind the scenes. 25 artists leveraged AI in some very unique, compelling way to take the original art from this one art, for the guy, Coco, take his original art drawings and then transform it into this animated, very trippy film. But if you just heard AI, you would think that was a text prompt. But no, there was a 25-person team behind that whole thing.
And that's why when before you were talking about workflows and recording your workflow, when he started showing us the process behind it, you were just like, oh my God, because it's not just, I mean, they uploaded basically 60 original images from this artist, and then they trained a model on that art, and then they actually created real drawn animations, and then they used that data set to apply a filter over that video. And it added that final touch to the video. But behind the scenes, you would have, if you're just an AI hater, you're gonna go, oh, that was just all text to video. Not realizing it's 25 people, multi-months process, 60 original art pieces, using 3D, using all these different tools to create an amazing product.
So,
Paid by Microsoft.
yeah, so do
Microsoft
we
TM.
know of any companies that are working on this process? Like, this seems like a huge opportunity to sort of, I don't know if formalize is the right word, but sort of provide this as if not education, as a service for artists. Perhaps it just needs to be a new institute here.
Well, yeah, I like that concept of an institute. I mean, we just launched today, actually, and you guys can all get copies of this, an AI studio report. So it's the first of its kind industry report from my company at Fabric, and it's 64 pages long. We interviewed Paul Trillo from Asteria. We interviewed Secret Level, who's out here, Jason, Zada, and Eric Shamlin.
Jason, yeah.
We interviewed Promise, a bunch of groups. But we had 98 studios in the database. Now we have 100, but for that report, 98 studios, data from there. We have 7 interviews. But what's really compelling about it was that each one of these studios, these self-proclaimed AI studios, self-reporting to us, everyone has a different take on what makes them different and makes them unique. And what I really loved was that, for just piggybacking on talking about Paul, Paul's studio, Asteria, is focusing primarily right now on just 2D animation, helping revolutionize 2D animation where they are very artist-driven, and they're focusing more on the productivity side of like, I want this model, I want this AI tool to do all the shit we hate doing as an artist, so that we can focus on the parts of the artistic process that we love. And when you go show them, when he goes and shows you how he does things, you're like, holy shit. Like, you realize like there's this huge increase in productivity, so that really you can get a better product. So it's like you're saving some time, but then you're taking that saved time and putting it back into the project. So it's not like you're really saving time, you're just getting more bites at the apple. You're failing faster, you're being able to move faster and be able to create better artwork because of that efficiency, right? That productivity, which is pretty freaking compelling. So this studio report helps really showcase how every different studio that we interviewed has a different approach of how they're using these tools for their own sake of productivity. Some of them are focusing on commercials, some of them are focusing on narrative, some of them are focusing on interactive, some of them, you know, everyone has their own vibe. And I think it's pretty compelling, and I think there's a lot of wealth of knowledge that needs to be shared through these types of studios, and an institute-type model would be perfect for that.
I'd say for one of the things I love about doing venture capital is that we constantly be investing in things that are on the cutting edge and bleeding edge side. And when I think about where we are today from even 5 years ago, the ability to have constant capital efficiency, in content creation is awesome for the world of founders and investors to kind of invest into the next cutting edge content creation that can be monetized. But it reminded me from 5 years ago, there was a company that was called Quibi that was created that we didn't invest in, but it was created and ultimately launched during COVID. And the concept of Quibi, if you guys aren't remember the company, the goal was to create, monetize, 7-minute to 15-minute episodes. And they ended up raising, I think, about almost $2 billion. Raised all that money, spent all of it on creating content from scratch without actually confirming from the general market. They didn't do like the normal founder process of like confirming people want it before you actually start working on it. But it was designed, during a time where they thought that the general public wanted to consume really short form, high quality content. I don't think what they were expecting was that COVID was going to happen and people had a lot more free time on their hands. But maybe short form content would have taken off if COVID didn't happen. But it was an example of a lot of money spent before you could do AI generation. So you had a lot of content spent on money spent on content, where today you could effectively create Quibi with significantly less money.
Well,
was that the app where you could watch it vertical
and
horizontal?
Exactly.
Their play was vertical, and they really thought that, and obviously COVID screwed this part over, that people would be watching this content on the go. So in the subway, on the ride to work or school. And of course, the pandemic happened and we're all at home, so we're just gonna watch the regular TV.
Watch Tiger King.
Who remembers
Watch
Quibi?
Tiger King.
Tiger King.
Do y'all use it? Yeah.
But what's interesting is, like, if you heard about holy water. So basically, in Asia, vertical video is super hot. 2-minute episodes is a microtransactional type play. There's a company called Kling. That's this thing. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But there's a few different like heavy hitter type apps, like real streams and real shorts. Thank you. And Flex. That was it. Flex and Real Shorts. And there's probably a few others. And these ones are like killing it, where they're taking content that they're probably shooting a 20-minute episode that they cut up into 2-minute clips for under $250,000. And then they, upload it, and you buy it in like packages, and it's all through microtransactions. And one guy was telling me that he created one of these shorts for them. I think he said they spent $80,000 on the 20-minute short, and the platform was making $1 million a week through advertising, through not just advertising, but through these microtransactions, and just fucking blew my mind. And I feel like there's a lot of people, experimenting in that space, especially more in the Asian culture. And now there's certain companies trying to do this in America. One of them being this new company just got this big investment called Holy Water. And what they've done is they've gotten the licensing of books and comic books and all these different things. And now they're doing short form video with a little bit of enhancement using AI, and it's vertical content. And so I think it's a really interesting thing. Like Quibi was onto something timing and execution totally failed. But now there's definitely a lot of companies, or more companies, not a lot, but more companies coming out with this vertical type, snackable content. Most of it's like really, I don't know who in here maybe would watch this. Like, I don't watch it. It's like soapy romantic comedy stuff, like where it's very cringeworthy, but for some people, it's great entertainment.
There's something for everyone, right?
Yeah, there's someone. Yeah. No shame.
Yeah, no, totally. If you no judgment here, judgment-free zone. I want to talk about the technology platforms and some of the monetization platforms. Alex, I know you've seen a lot of this in terms of the platforms, and John too, obviously from what y'all have seen at YouTube. How should creators select appropriate distribution platforms to effectively reach target audiences, considering the unique characteristics of AI-generated film, especially the things that we just talked about right now, right? So like how short form is potent, seems like maybe just looking for the right time to really catch on. And I know we've talked about drama as being a big hit in the US lately. Some of the things that we've seen today are very sort of I think still have this kind of early dystopian feel. But what about the platforms should creators keep in mind in terms of getting distribution?
Yeah, for sure. So definitely, we have been working on AI dramas ourselves, so we have seen that AI-generated dramas outperform non-AI-generated. And I think there are direct-to-consumer platforms like Hollywoodster, which is coming from Europe. I think Dream Short and Real Short, which are coming from China, who can actually move much faster than traditional social media and production houses. And they do already provide monetization opportunities for creators. They are not bounded by like some copyright concerns. They do move very quickly to production. And going back to Quibi tried to be more like Netflix, have maybe 6, 9 months, 12 months planning and production flow, while these companies, they try to make one show a week. So it's a much faster velocity. I think this is definitely going to enable a set, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of creators, as we already can see that there are a lot of platforms for scriptwriters to monetize their scripts. InKids, Wattpads are large platforms. Hollywoodster has its own platform. But I think obviously the biggest opportunity is for X and Facebook make you a millionaire, right? That would be cool. So, and I think the problem is that today we don't know like why these kittens, like these AI-generated kittens, like cats, like these brain rot contents. It's
or the minions. Everyone's doing the content with the minions.
Like these,
Star Wars.
Like
or the mini workers.
Because like I think these. With all due respect to you and Paul, you do obviously much better job than they do, but they do maybe 100x more views, right? So it's like, I think Facebook and YouTube, they need to explain like how they're gonna run AI contents, and they must handle a copyright problem as well. And I think that I need to explain this back on my experience from Snapchat. So in Snapchat, we had smaller budget than TikTok, so we couldn't license all music library. So we had to negotiate with music owners how we are gonna do revenue share when someone posts, let's say, a dance with certain copyrighted music track. Same should happen with visual content, right? Like you may wanna do a parody with Simpsons, and I think then if you get 1 million views, you get some revenue yourself, and the platform should share some revenue to Simpsons. I think and I hope that's, I mean, Hollywoodster is obviously leading elites for these niche applications, and I hope that social media companies are gonna catch up and create a clear monetization and revenue split opportunities, and maybe a little decrease share of brain rot content. It's growing so crazily.
I mean, on Instagram, it might be the worst algorithm currently for a lot of creators. I know one of my friends I met at Adobe, Sebastian, he does tech videos. He has about 600,000 followers on Instagram. His videos used to get, say, 125,000 views every single post. Now they're doing maybe 20,000 views a post. Instagram's algorithm is really pushing this type of brain rot, low-level content. So don't beat yourself up when you post something on Instagram and it's getting no views. It's really, I mean, the stuff that's getting views is the videos of the little workers working on like a pizza pie. I don't know if you've seen those videos. It's like the little mini workers, that or like the minions doing something really disgusting. That's going viral and stuff like that. That's why you have to post on multiple platforms and make sure your content is made for those platforms. When I'm posting on TikTok, I'll post a video on X, like I did the Fallout video, recreating reimagining a global Fallout game. And on X, it was a simple, hey, Fallout world, and I described it and made with these tools. But on TikTok, I'm posting that video, and I'm not posting it widescreen. I'm posting it 9:16. I'm adding a background, and then on the top of it, I'm adding text that says the description. Because you have to catch someone's attention in 3 seconds. You have really 1 second to get someone's eyes. You have 3 seconds to keep their attention, and then after that, if you don't get that, the view's gone. And you have to design this content for each individual platform, and that's why every single time I upload for YouTube Shorts and TikTok and Instagram, it's the same type of format. Whereas I'm posting on YouTube and X, that's another type of format. So you have to really make sure your content is designed. Even though as a creator or a filmmaker, you're like, that doesn't look good in 9:16. It looks horrible. Well, that's how people are viewing the content. You have to design your content for that medium.
Yeah, I think that explains why I don't get any views on Instagram, so thank you, I appreciate it.
No, don't worry, it's okay.
I think and everyone is right? Platforms are everything. So when creators are creating something, they got to put it somewhere to create money, right? They got to pay for their stuff, either pre or they got to make their money up for it post. So with platforms like YouTube, it is behooving upon us to make a platform that you can monetize. Because if you can monetize your content on our platform, you're going to keep coming back and putting your content on our platform, right? So I agree that you have to have a semblance of this type of format, this type of content's going to play well on which platform, but that's where AI really comes in and helps you, right? You can create one type of content and you can have it be relevant for multiple platforms. You can also have AI infer to you which type of content is currently being monetized on which platform, so you can target where you think your content's going to land the best to make the most return on your investment that you've made. And again, we're in the business of making creators money, because without creators, YouTube is nothing, right? And we've done a pretty good job at it, but we can always do better, and we're using our own dog food. We're using our own AI to go find content that isn't amplified. And how do we start amplifying that? And if we amplify content that makes sense to the brands that are putting their faith in us from an advertisement perspective, that's better for us. It's also better for the creator, because to your point, it's not finding a parody and then giving you a little bit of money out of it and you a bit of money out of it. That's too much for a platform to manage, right? I can't say, okay, you own 25% rights in The Simpsons, so I got to give you that. You earn 13.2%, I give you that. It's just too much. It becomes unwieldy. So we have the copyright checks that are built in through AI. If it's Simpsons, then we're not going to publish it. But we do offer you the ability to come in and go, well, I'd like to meet these criteria over here, and we will check it and go, okay, well, probably not, right? I mean, you said your content is 18 plus, and all of the tags you're putting in for below 18 or 16 and below, that's a mismatch. How can we help you reach the audience that you want? Because again, more content on our platform, the better it is for everybody, because we get to monetize it more and you keep coming back to us.
I'd say for thinking back to the monetization point, as VCs, we love finding opportunities that are the largest possible markets on earth that can be commercialized. Content, by far, is certainly one of the largest things that you can also monetize. And when you think of maximum market size overall, effectively, if you could get everyone's eyeballs on watching content 24 hours a day, you could maximize revenue production of the human species. Maybe you could also figure out a way to monetize like monkeys and other animals watching content too. But there is a maximum market size of even content based on the number of hours in a day, and you can only be really watching one thing at a time. And so when we think about the future of monetization business models, you largely have, in terms of dimensions, you have physical and digital products, and you have physical and digital channels. And every quarter, we play a little game internally at our fund about what are the kind of the new dimensions of commerce for monetization. And this idea of time and space often comes up as kind of new dimensions. And when I think about, as you have a leveling up of the quality of content that's being created through AI and through humans, eventually the question is, well, what's the core value proposition of watching any content? Well, why do you watch anything? And are you willing to pay for it? Are you willing to be monetized by it through ads? And one of the things that's come up more as a theory for us internally is that in the future, one of the interesting value props of content that can be monetized is not just the enjoyment factor, but the amount of time that it actually gives you. The idea of, can you actually watch content that speeds up time, or can you watch content that slows down time for you? And is there an aspect that you'd be willing to pay more money for content that actually slows down time or speeds up it from an experiential perspective, which is another interesting element.
I think on that as well, it's also that let's not forget that content isn't one shot, right? You have the ability to monetize and remonetize your content based upon how you can redistribute it, based upon how you can make it re-relevant, right? It happens more often than not in news and sports, but if you look at long form to short form, that's another way of remonetizing your content. If you look at short form to long form, right? That's another way of remonetizing your content. So I think one of the things that we were talking about, Todd was talking about, right, is that filmmaking is hard. It is really hard. AI filmmaking isn't any easier. It isn't the easy button for filmmaking, right? There's a ton of stuff that you have to do. Us putting a prompt in, that's just one step, right? And that should be a step that helps you in the filmmaking process. But using AI to aid you in the creative process is one way, but there's also using AI to help you understand what to create, where to release it, when to release it, and then therefore inferring how you're going to monetize it as well.
That's a fascinating idea of remonetizing your content. I mean, you mentioned sports. There's replays of certain games that can be watched over and over endlessly. Shows, certain shows are watched for. I'm sure like Seinfeld has been replayed. I don't know how many times. Right? I think I don't know that we're going to have time to dig into it. One interesting question, maybe, if anyone's interested to talk about after, is like. What about sports content? Where's AI going to play in that? That's a big section.
Yep.
Comment?
Yeah, probably I'm going to just very quickly start as in sports, it has been like live action content, which is being constantly repurposed. We have seen that NBA is doing more and more augmented reality on top of that, and I think NFL as well. And recently, we are really excited. Recently, some sports teams, they want to bring their mascots because, everyone knows that Milwaukee has these Bucks, right, and so on. So, and these mascots become like a part of the culture. Boston is Celtics. I mean, pretty much everyone knows that, right? So I think creating their own animated universe around this unique IP and their unique mascot, I think, is a huge opportunity. I think the brands, they actually start to pick up this idea these quarters. So hopefully AI filmmakers will have more work to do.
Yeah, with sports, we track this. So because of, again, back to my comment before about somewhat synthetic media and everything, I think anything live music, live filmmaking, sure, live sports is going to become more and more valuable, right? Getting out of the house or even just watching things on TV that are live in the moment is going to become more valuable. And so there's definitely a lot of different platforms that are trying to think about how are they going to leverage AI to give you better analytics, or like stats, real-time stats, or those quick cut replays. And there's a lot of companies doing like video segmentation right now, right? Especially around live. And then on top of that, to your point, yeah, definitely how you're expanding this brand identity that you so much love, and how are you going to actually give people even maybe different vantage points that they never used to have. So maybe it's for NASCAR, now you can be in the car, right, watching your favorite driver, and just being inside and having your own personalized feed just for that one driver when there's, I forget how many other drivers are around the track, right? I know there's platforms out there that are trying to work on those type of strategies where it's like a Web3 type play where you have a subscription and then you can pay extra for these different extra feeds, and then you have the chat and you get to have a conversation, building community just for those teams or player affinities that you have within a major sports league. And what else was I going to say? But yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say we have a portfolio company we invested in a few years ago called Fan Controlled Football. which has developed its own sports league for football. And the idea of how to be different than the NFL, which sometimes people have been referring to the no fun league because they can't do as many fun stuff. But fan control football, what was unique is that it was live content, but where the audience could vote on the plays of each team. So they kind of in real time, you'd say, do you want the team to do this play or that play? And the audience can actually pick the play. You had the stadium itself was built more like a TV show, where they have cameras everywhere, even on all the players, they have cameras on them, so when people are smashing into each other, you can see that from a camera perspective. But this idea that you have an engagement aspect where you could just sit back and watch content, but if you want to be engaged and control the players, almost like a real-life video game where you can control the players, was an interesting play. And we invested in that company pre-revenue, pre-product. It was just an idea. I thought I was crazy. We totally did as a flyer investment, this concept of a new football sports league, where even the audience can also own a piece of each of the teams from a crowdfunding perspective. So you can say that you're like a $5 owner of a particular sports team. But fast forward, the company's not dead, which I'm impressed. That itself is a win. But you've had a huge amount of capital that's actually gone into it from other top VCs, from like Lightspeed, into a company that initially sounded kind of crazy, but has continued on and going pretty strong.
Yeah, I'd like to see this sort of close-up of hockey smashing, and it makes it all the more fun. Hey, look, I think that's all the time, so please join me in thanking our amazing panel today for this conversation.
Good morning. Welcome to the first panel of the day. I'm Cory Treffiletti, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for a company called Rembrandt, which is an AI tool, but different than all these folks. We actually do AI for virtual product placement and video augmentation with realistic imagery inside of videos that you have. So we call it controllable diffusion, which is interesting because I'm watching these experimental videos this morning, and I'm looking at all these different people that I have to follow up with that get them to use our tools as well. But we're not here for me to talk. We're here for these wonderful people on my right side to talk. So we are in the ethics conversation this morning, and I'm just going to allow these folks here to introduce themselves. And then we're going to dive right into it based on some of the stuff you saw earlier today and some earlier conversations we had. So, Michele, do you want to get started?
Sure. I'm Michele Martel. I'm an entertainment, intellectual property, and data privacy lawyer. Spent most of my career in Los Angeles and then was fortunate enough to move to Austin about 11 years ago. I like to say that I'm probably the only person who's had the joy, let's say, of having both Kermit the Frog and Vince McMahon as my bosses, and I'll allow you guys to decide which one was a better boss. So in my practice here in Austin, I work with a lot of creators and makers. It's very different than LA, which has more of the production infrastructure. And one of my current clients makes the popular Walkabout Mini Golf, which is one of the most popular games in virtual reality currently. And so it's fun because we get to be right on the cutting edge of what's happening in that space. And I'm excited to share it with Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Landolt. I'm an associate professor of instruction here at the University of Texas at Austin. My home department is here at the McCombs School of Business. The department's called Business, Government, and Society, but I also teach at the LBJ School and in the Department of Computer Science. My specialty, like Michele, is intellectual property law. I teach a class on name, image, and likeness in NCAA sports, and then I also teach behavioral ethics at all of the different departments around the university, and I teach entrepreneurship.
Thank you. I'm PJ Way. Yeah, right. I always follow up. It's always the fun part. I'm PJ Way. I founded AI Film 3. My background is actually in technology. I've spent about the last 30 years serving as an IT advocate and a leader in roles from chief information officer to vice president at a college. I worked in government as well, currently working in government. And big focus on AI is in government conversations is pretty diverse, and it's not anything different than what we're experiencing right now when it comes down to when should we be using, what kind of, should we be building policy, what does that look like, what are the ethical practices of it, how do we implement it, and I'm glad to be here. I'm really honored to be here with these great people, and it's going to be certainly a great conversation.
Thanks for having us. I'm Nick Kleverov, Chief Creative at Native Foreign. We are the studio behind the infamous Toys R Us spot. I'm one of the first 7 Sora Alpha artists. Earlier in my career, I was a creative director, did a lot of titles, notably Narcos and others. and a couple new AI films that I think Luma's playing one of them, and yeah, happy to be here.
And then my name is Benjamin Michel. I'm the head of generative animation at Asteria Film Co. So we focus on film and entertainment, animation. We're also just in Hollywood trying to make AI less scary, focusing on kind of the ethics and keeping it sort of friendly and encouraging and inviting to artists, and then also partnering with Moon Valley, which recently announced a clean video model. So also kind of trying to help build a video model that's also intended for, you know, kind of a more ethical future in AI, which hopefully we'll dig into a little more today.
So we are going to touch on the ethics of the platforms. We're going to touch on a lot of the different elements that are part of this conversation, but I want to start with one thing. We watched the experimental videos a little while ago, and in every one of those videos, you could see the inspiration, in many cases, for where they got to. They utilized different tools to create something that's absolutely new and unique, and in many cases is copyrightable, is completely new and exclusive content. So I want to start on this side with you two. Who defines what is ethically trained? Who defines what is copyrightable? What is the line between when something is inspired and brought to you in good conscience with some other inspiration to create something new and that can be owned separately?
Well, I'll tackle the copyright stuff and I'll leave ethics to you. So you guys probably know this, but in intellectual property, we think about things like copyright as a bundle of sticks, right? So I create something and I have a copyright in it and I can control what other people do with that material, right? I'm gonna license you the right to create derivative work. And so kind of one of the big copyright questions in generative AI stuff is, can you have a copyright in something if you don't own the underlying work that then delivered the new work, right? So if you have issues with the, how you created the LLM, then you have issues around whether or not you can own the output. And actually, on Monday of this week, we had Miriam Lord from the US Copyright Office speaking to a bunch of lawyers and creatives as part of a South by experience, and she reaffirmed, right, the Copyright Office has issued some recent reports, and the basic thing and the basic principle is that you have to see sort of the evidence of the human creation. And so the current standard, which they're continuing to uphold even as cases are being challenged, is that you can't currently register for copyright something in which you say this is all created by generative AI. You can register something and say, here's my graphic novel, I created the text, generative AI created the images, you have to disclaim the AI part. They've also sort of clarified how you can use generative AI. So for example, I don't know if you know this, but when cameras first came out, you couldn't copyright a photograph because it was like this tool is doing it, and then they realized, oh no, there's artistry in this, your framing, your composition, the lighting. And so I think we can sort of use that same sort of line here, which is if I can see the human hand versus I'm using the Gen AI extend, right? I want to fill in the color over here, or I want to, take distracting objects out. The Copyright Office doesn't really have an issue with that. That's de minimis AI. But right now, they're super clear that they don't need new laws or new processes, that the Copyright Office principles still cover creation, which is we have to see the person creating it separate from the tool.
Yeah, when it comes to what is ethical and who decides, it always comes down to the law is behind technology. What is legal and what is ethical are always, or can be, very different. When we think about frameworks, it's about appropriation and attribution. Have you appropriated something from an earlier creator, and have you failed to give attribution to their work? In any sort of situation about is it ethical, it always comes down to what is the ethical decision-making model that you're using. There are many different frameworks and standards that can apply. Nobody has agreed on what the ultimate one is. The law is always behind technology, but it can expand, and the same with ethics. It expands to, if you think about deontology, if everybody in the world were doing what you did, would that be okay? Also thinking about, we used to call it the Wall Street Journal test, but it's just like the internet test. If a decision you made today became public to every single single person in the world tomorrow, could you defend the action that you took? In any business model or approach, the most effective decisions are ones that were intentional, that followed a multi-step process and analyzed and revisited the results. And that doesn't change with technology. And so those foundational principles still exist.
Yeah. But I'm going to shoot down to the other end. So Ben, you've talked when we first had this conversation about the ethical training of the models, the underlying foundation here. How does that factor into this part of the conversation?
Yeah, I think there's kind of we see and from our perspective on it, there's kind of two ends of the liability, right? Like there's the, are you scraping data that is offering the opportunity for people to accidentally infringe on someone's copyright, and so that's where I think the clean model comes into place. And so for that, the Moon Valley approach has been to license all the data, which has been a combination of people who have large libraries of video material, but also working directly with filmmakers and friends who have lots of kind of great video, cinematic, kind of footage and animation, and sort of kind of creating a consent to utilize that within the model themselves and a compensation structure to accommodate that. On the flip side, and kind of what we focus on at Asteria is actually the human authorship component itself. So as we talk to all the major studios and talk to filmmakers and people who have kind of IP concerns, which is central to the whole premise of the entertainment industry, right, is being able to create characters that people love and create stories that people love. So we kind of focus on really a originality at the beginning of every project. So we still hire art directors and production designers and writers and 2D animators and 3D animators to all participate in that process. I think we just look to augment what they can do within the kind of the finite resources that budgets will permit. And so I think a lot of it too is making sure that you have, irrespective of any of the AI conversation, there's a diligence that's required in originality. We've seen how in the past, we were just talking about how Monsters, Inc. and Stanley Mouse, how that film, the release of Monsters, Inc. was almost halted by the courts because there was a lot of similarities between the Mike Wazowski Green Cyclops character, and studios vet and do tons of diligence to make sure that there's original art and the characters and stories that they're putting out there. And so that's incumbent on us as a creative community anyways. And so that process doesn't go away, and I think that's why the Copyright Office views this moment as not actually that distinct from others. AI just maybe accelerates the degree to which we can appropriate other people's material accidentally or intentionally. And so, yeah, there's kind of two sides to that coin. I think we're kind of looking at both of those.
Yeah. Nick and PJ, when you have people in the process, they're creating the ideas, they're ideating what the film is going to be about, they're using these different tools to go create what's going to be on the screen, the audio and everything else behind it. How do you find that balance of trying to figure out, is what they are creating inspired by, or is it in the style of, versus being able to create something new? Because we're all inspired by something. We're always taking into account something else because there's not that much original thought that's out there. It just doesn't really exist. But the application of that original thought to a different idea is really where the defensibility comes from. So how do you maintain that correct balance of using the tools and using that intrinsic human quality?
There is nothing new under the sun, as they say. And I'll give one example. So there's an early AI film that we did called Critters. And Perkins Coie represents us as a law firm. And very early on, we created this world of critters, primarily using early DALL-E tools and outpainting and all this stuff. And we actually kept very detailed records and logs of like, here's this character, and here's like the 100 generations that it went through for eyeball changes and limbs and things like that, so that when we did start our copyright ambitions for Critters, to not just copyright the property or the story or the little script, but like the actual characters, Perkins Coie was able to work with us because we kept these like very detailed logs and records. Now, I do think it's kind of a pain in the ass to like, when you're in the creative zone and mode, like I know there's just like other creatives, like my computer's a mess, my desktop and down, it's just like, and then like every week I have to spend like several hours just like cleaning up things and putting them in the folders where they go. So if anyone wants to build an AI for that, by the way, that'd be awesome. But, it's like the ability to then say like, oh yeah, no, these are characters we created, we've assigned them names and backstories, and it's kind of what you were saying is a lot of that traditional work of art directors, writers, going in and establishing things, I think is so important. And what we are looking for is abilities to create more and create quicker. And so I think smaller teams can have a bigger impact, and that's what I'm excited about as a creative and a partner at a small firm is we're able to actually explore more things, both on the brand client side, but also just originals and things that we've been wanting to do. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Can I give an example? So this video game client, they'll use generative AI sort of in the brainstorming process, right? We're going to create a walkabout mini golf course in Venice. So let me do a whole bunch of mood boards and color changes. And then they leave it over there and they start fresh with their human hands. So we have clarity around, you use this to sort of brainstorm, you get an idea, and then you kind of separately start building it yourself. So they're not using it in the process for that sort of cleanness of like, just the guidance internally is you can use it for something that doesn't impact the crown jewels, right? If you want to mess around with some marketing stuff, cool, but you're not going to bring kind of that uncertainty into the product that makes money for the company, right? So they've sort of, at this point, gardened it off. So you can use it this way, but not in this way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a filmmaker or creative in the digital age that didn't begin their process through, whether they're on shot deck or they're creating rip reels from other inspiration from other people's films. I mean, that's usually how you kind of get people's buy-in to an idea, right? Is so pulling in other influences, and so I think that part of it is AI only extends on that.
But the point being, like, if I came in with a pitch deck, it's in the room, right? I'm like, yeah, I just sort of mocked up Jack Nicholson's face, whatever, but I'm not going to try to make money from this, right? So there's sort of a thing of people have been doing that for a long time. Like, I'm going to put people in my pitch, and it's not real.
Yeah, and I think as an early development tool, I think it's really useful to get teams, to have clarity on what the vision is for something. But there's a moment where you cross into this threshold where you have to author something new, and I think that's that moment where you have to separate those influences a little bit or synthesize something new out of that, and that's the obligation that the creatives have, again, irrespective of AI.
Could we clarify just for a second? Is it the perspective of commercialization versus the entertainment factor, right? And when we talk nationally or internationally or globally, for example, I'm in Arizona. Arizona has 22 tribal nations. They want to share their stories. They want to share some of their tribal histories. Well, in order to do that, they're going to be doing things that maybe existing copyright took from them. And how do they claim what may be something they've produced as a culture or a history? I guess my point is when it comes down to the use cases that we're talking about for AI from a commercialization standpoint versus the AI that we're creating here for exploration, for new ventures, new ideas, new creativity, because you're right. I mean, there are no new ideas. I mean, Marvel plays it over and over and over again, and we keep watching it. So how do we do that with something new and different becomes a challenge because you create another superhero that's got a cape and he happens to wear red and blue. Man, do you have a lawsuit on your hands? That's kind of silly, in my opinion. Now, that's a different issue, different argument, but I think from a perspective of use case, we should be encouraged to use these tools still, knowing that we're going in good conscience, we're making the best efforts, we're not intentionally acting in malice or trying to take somebody else's ideas or concepts. I think that goes a lot further because I know the law doesn't always look at intent, but sometimes it's really hard to defend when the application or the person that's sharing their vision has no knowledge of that other thing or has no retrospect to it. So the tools they're using are in their best interest to believe to be the right tools anyways. I hope that made sense.
Yeah. Karen, who's the gatekeeper for all of this, though? Because there's a lot to try and monitor and maintain some sort of legal precedent against. Who is the gatekeeper?
I mean, in the United States, everything comes down to the rule of law. So there's not a gatekeeper until somebody gets pissed and sues. And so,
well,
Tuesday, right? Yeah.
That happens every day of the week.
So Sarah Silverman got mad about her book being appropriated in the Books 3 database, and so she's trying to hold people accountable. Margaret Atwood wrote an article in The Atlantic about a year ago called Murdered by My Replica, where she was talking about AI that was trained on her books and then supposed to write like her, and lucky for her, it sucks. But they didn't even pay for the original copy of each one of her books that they used to train it on, right? And that's where the question comes in with the original creator is, Did you even pay for my content? Because that is at least what copyright law requires under licensing and under derivative works. And when nobody's even paying for the original content, that's when we have a problem. That's when the system gets broken. But who is enforcing it? The person who gets mad, who goes to court. And then we have to look at each case as it happens and determine what the overall ruling is going to be, and it's going to be super messy. And we're going to be looking at the First Circuit in New York City, and we're going to be looking at the Ninth Circuit in California. They're going to lead the way, and at some point, there's going to be enough disagreement, then it's going to go up to the Supreme Court, and then we'll have some kind of standard that people will apply. Until then, it's the wild, wild west.
I would also just say that like ethics don't just relate to laws. It's like ethics are actually how we govern ourselves individually, and laws reflect kind of enough consensus around those ethics. And so I think there is a lot of I think there should be a lot of interest in, especially those of us that are in this early stage of AI, to get ahead of those concerns, right? And so if you are using AI, making sure that you've generated a lot of original artwork, whether that's written or visual, and then if you need to fine tune around your own art, the Copyright Office has, specified that works that are adequately derivative of a fine-tuned data set around original artwork, that stuff is copyrightable. And so I think that that's where we sort of we should, if we don't want to destroy all the good grace that we can have with artists and creatives and even consumers who care about these things, by getting ahead of those ethical concerns and choosing a path that is intended to be as ethical as possible, because we want to govern ourselves as humans in that way. And I think that's where we can move away from this kind of sort of a really pessimistic view of the future. And that's where the ethical conversation, I think, should be heading, is sort of getting ahead of those things rather than waiting for the law to mandate it.
I couldn't agree more, but he was asking who's the final judge. But I think we right now, as creators, as educators, as innovators, we need to say society has always needed an ethical standard in order for us to coexist. And let's agree that privacy and attribution and appropriation are some really good foundational places to start.
And I just there's a corollary to data privacy, right? So if you look at the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU, which is, 75 pages and goes on, how do you comply? Or you could look at, there's 12 principles of privacy by design that sort of takes you to sort of the big idea: data minimization, accuracy, transparency. And so when I talk to clients who are freaking out about how do I comply with a million different data rules, I'm like, be here. Be in data by privacy principles, because that aligns you mostly with the legal stuff. And if down the road you meant like, oh, I sort of didn't tick 12A, 1 little b, you're like, okay, but broadly you're acting in good faith. But that does require you, and the other point I want to make is copyright generally. We live in an economic universe in which copyright has value and licensing is how you create revenue, right? So intellectual property is generational wealth creation. And so as a creator, you kind of have an obligation to respect the rules of intellectual property because you want them to apply to you. So if one of those experimental films takes off, becomes a feature, spawns an entire enterprise of toys and Happy Meals, all that stuff, they're going to want to control that intellectual property and say, you can't use it without my permission, and we're going to do these deals. And so, whether good or bad, we live in this economic structure in which controlling and understanding the rights to intellectual property has an implication. And so you can choose to make fun stuff and never make any money for it. That's great. But if you want to receive the benefits of your work, you're going to want to think about, can I own it? And can I manage how other people use it? Because that's how you make money.
That's literally, that's what we're doing with Critters. So some of you may have heard that, after this little short that we made, that OpenAI did grant and help fund originally, we've kept it going over the years, and now the writers of Paddington in Peru just signed on, and so we're like turning into a feature, and we have big ideas and ambitions for stuff that was originally created with AI, so we are trying to make sure we safeguard, show all the work, so to speak, and be able to move things forward.
Yeah. So we're talking so far pretty heavily about the output. I'm going to do something different. So I'm going to ask the audience a very loaded question first. How many of you, by show of hands, you put your hands up, have used AI in the last month to create something? It's a really loaded question. Okay. All right. Now, keep your hands up. How many of you have actually done the homework to determine if the platform you used was ethically trained? A couple of you. You are the really intelligent people in this room. So for anybody up here, I'm just going to throw this one out. Is it the responsibility of the creator to determine if the platforms they're using are ethically trained or not?
I have a take on that.
Go for it, PJ.
My take on that would be intent again. If I'm looking to monetize this and I'm looking to have a specific intent on doing something that this would warrant research, yes. I think if we're going to look at mass adoption and bringing in people to start welcoming the technology, the tools, educating themselves, putting them into classrooms, that's something we can teach on a behavioral basis within the classrooms once adoption happens. If we start putting restrictions around these things now, or we tell people you must or thou shall, you're going to have a much slower adoption rate and probably missing out on good opportunities to grow the adoption and get tomorrow's students to become the next generation of filmmakers or creators or artists or people that can just leverage AI into other tools and technology.
You know what we should see, though? Instead of making it be this huge burden on the person who's using it, is you should have just like the nutritional label, right? This has been approved for, preschoolers 1 to 3 to do these, like, tell me on the box if I can use it, right? Now we don't have that, but ultimately that's where we'd be, so you wouldn't have to do the heavy lifting.
But we do have academic standards of just citation, right? So I tell my students, use AI, but tell me that you used it and cite it properly. That fixes everything, at least from an academic standpoint, of just be transparent about what you did and give credit to where it came from. And it may turn out that what you used was unethical, but at least you now have record that that's what you used, and we can go back and investigate that.
I think that there's also, this whole, I think why this is such a troublesome topic right now is that this was intended originally to be a field of research, right? And it's not without precedent that there are large scrape data sets for research. There's Common Crawl, the Human Genome Project. These are all things that are released for the purposes of academics or students to use for research purposes, right? To broaden their understandings of the world or explore new ideas. And I think that we just went from like research to commercialization kind of in the matter of a year and a half, and so there was never a moment where we paused and I think that there was an appropriation of the kind of the freedom and consent that people gave a little more towards research without pausing to examine how the implications of that. And so I think that's from your guys' perspective, I don't know that you should have to abide necessarily by using only ethically trained models if it's part of what your journey of self education or exploration of ideas. But I think that to your earlier point, that the second that that's something you want to commercialize and really monetize, that's where I think you have to start and make serious evaluations about the kind of the provenance of data and all those things.
I've said this several times to different people at different points, is that I love going to Comic-Cons. I'm still a nerd at heart. I've been going since I was a little kid. And you go to the Comic-Cons, you'll find artists that are sitting there with their pen and paper and they're sketching out the next Mickey Mouse or Superman, and nobody complains. They get paid $25 for the sketch, and you want to get it from the original Disney artist, it's going to cost you $500. And he happens to sit directly across from the guy that's making the same thing for $25. I don't see that being a huge challenge when it comes down to that IP. I don't see it being a challenge when it comes down to that copyright, because we are inspired by the artworks that we see around us. We're inspired by the cultures that we recognize. We are products of our environment. I truly do believe that. I think that we can overcome our areas or what we've experienced through knowledge, education, opportunity, but that stuff doesn't happen if we start putting restrictions around it. And I'm a very vocal advocate when it comes down to legislation and what they're doing in political offices with the recognition of AI in general, and why it matters to be vocal for yourself, to become, you want to talk about a good chance to be educated on these topics, go talk to your legislators, because they know nothing of it, and they're really just listening to lobbyists. So you have to really be a self-advocate for what you're believing in with the AI tools.
So is it possible to say that we should separate the artistic use from the commercial use, and that the definition of what is considered ethical can fluctuate between those two paradigms right now? Or does it need to be some foundational layer that actually has to be the same no matter what? Well, this is why we have you two up here.
I was just going to say one of the things real quick was that the internet's a good example of evolution, right? That was not designed to be released to the public. That was actually intended for military purposes.
Look what we did with
for
it.
government research. And then they decided, we can't do anything with this. We don't know what to do. Let's turn it over to them. And that's how we got it.
Well, I mean, that's how all research happens at a university. It's dual-use technology.
Right. Yep.
It always starts with military. That's where the money is. And then you hope that there's some peaceful application of what it is. But every major research university is a military contractor. That's all we are. Here at UT, Columbia's in a lot of trouble because they're military contractors and Trump shut down their money, right? I mean, UT has a center for ethical application of AI. It's called Good Systems. They did actually try and circulate a letter to say, let's put a pause on things. There was a point where all of the leading researchers in the academic world, led by Good Systems, were like, and they all signed off on the letter, and it lasted an hour, I think. I mean, because there was money to be made. And so, I lost the thread of your question, but when there's money to be made, people lose the thread of the question.
Michelle's dying to answer this one, so.
I was just sort of struggling between the distinction between artistic and commercial. Because commercial work is artistic, and artistic work, there's not, right?
For sure.
And you made something, and then you put it in a drawer, and then it turns out to have value, right? And so, again, I love the idea of just sort of having design principles, right? Where if you're using generative AI, you don't want to make people think it's real when it's not. You don't want to create artificial versions and present them as if they were real. Even just in the experimental stuff, I loved, particularly the one with all the famous men's faces, and it was just said, created by AI the entire time, right? So, because they're giving us real people's faces doing sort of real things, although we've never seen them laugh, right? That was what was weird about that.
I don't even know if they sleep.
I don't know, they don't sleep anywhere. So I think it's more not sort of a distinction between is there a circumstance or a case that it's ethical to use other people's work. In our current IP structures pretty much around the world, the answer is no, it's not. How that gets defined is fought out in the courts, and it's case by case, and there's not good bright lines. But if you're thinking those things, if you're acting ethically, I am not trying to deceive people. I am not trying to convince people that some terrible thing is happening. There's all kinds of guidelines out there. There's big EU AI Act directives just broadly about how you should use AI, right? And so I think it's almost kind of thinking ethically and then acting commercially.
Yeah, and it's like inspiration, right? Romeo and Juliet has inspired thousands upon thousands of stories, and it comes down to the individual expression, right? The idea-expression dichotomy. Irish Abbey Rose, I think, is a movie about, and West Side Story. They're products of their culture and their era, between Italians and Irish, and then between Puerto Ricans and native white New Yorkers, right? It's all the same story on a large level, but then it comes down to the details, and that's always the expression where the protection is. Mm-hmm. And between art and commercial, I mean, when J.K. Rowling was refused by 10 different publishing companies, she was an artist. And then when the 11th one said yes, she's a commercial success. Sure. There's no difference.
So is it going back to, and I'm going to get crucified for this analogy, but do you remember in the 1980s when the government defined pornography as we don't really know until you see it? Are we kind of going in that direction right now? Is it too early to really worry about the legal precedence of what AI can enable you to create?
The problem is, I think it's really tricky on an individual artist level when also, as consumers, we have an expectation of like, if I paid for something, then I get to use it or I get to do it. So there's a lot of artists that are solopreneurs or, individual creators that are signing up for one of the plethora of tools that are available now, and they're paying $20 a month or whatever. They're like, well, I should be able to use this. Yeah. Or more. So there's I think there's a bit of an obligation to the tools providers to let us know what rights we have within that tool, because it's like it shouldn't be on. You're providing a service, so within that service, you should be letting people know, hey, is this cool? And especially as we get into a world where there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of video models that are super niche. You know, one's going to be trained on 10,000 hours of anime. One's going to be trained on, you know, really cool stock footage, so it's going to be more artsy. Like, everyone's going to be using this grab bag of tools, and, you know, our individual creativity is going to be based on, like, what pipeline and workflow have we all developed of, like, oh, how do you get that look? You know, how do you do that? Oh, because I ran it through this, then this, then this, then this, then this. And that is how we're able to see, like, so much creativity start pouring through. And I mean, I was genuinely impressed with the films I saw today, especially just, like, versus 2 years ago, some of the AI film festivals. Like, the work is really starting to speak for itself. And it's not just like, hey, we're all here because we like AI. Awesome, you know. It's actually getting good.
Yeah, and once again, it's like, who's your inspiration? And do we give attribution? Like, Margaret Atwood in her article is like, I was a hack when I started. I wrote by the artists, the authors who inspired me, and eventually I found my own voice. And that's true with everyone who starts out. Everything's Beatlesque until it becomes, you know, Lenny Kravitz or whatever, right?
But can we figure out a way to then give the people that are cited in that prompt a 5-cent royalty when that happens? You know?
I mean, we do it with sampling and hip hop. I mean,
There you go.
you got to just find an economic model and give people, and like SoundCloud and Spotify, you get like a 1/16 of a cent or something. Eventually, that adds up. If you get 2,000 listens a month, then you get some money. Otherwise, you got nothing.
It's an interesting analogy because the music business did have to deal with this. But even if you look at sampling, you can change the sound of a song and the snippet that you pull. But in many cases, the AI tools are being trained on something that the creator who's using it has never seen and has no idea that's there. So to your point, Nick, it really does kind of sit on the shoulders of the companies themselves to help figure that out.
And there's an ethics too, even if that's part of the policy, right? Like, I mean, you deal with this all the time where rights have to be audit, licensing deals have to be. You have to every creative has to audit, or typically will audit if they own a piece of some IP that's, they made a hit franchise show or they made a hit song. They're constantly having to audit, and there's ethics in how studios and kind of larger entities that exploit IP even write down expenses against it. So there's a ton of other loaded ethical questions there. I think just in general, I think the hope is that the ability to, kind of lower the barrier of entry to actually produce these materials means that creatives can actually own much more significant parts of that and may eventually not need, not to scare away any of the large studios here, but there's a version of the future where creatives are the principal owners and executors of their intellectual property, which is something that doesn't really exist in meaningful ways as much today.
But yes, and the large studios, I think, still will survive because it is a bit like the music industry. I mean, it's a marketing machine. They own the minions, right? So even once they develop the tools to do it and they have the artists working on that account, my kid will watch every Minions thing ever made. If there's a new Minions movie every day, he will just watch it. So I think there is still, and that's still something we can all aspire to, is to create lovable IP that people really genuinely care about, and that's where you can actually win ultimately, and that's where also the studios still get to exist, because they're also putting money into deciding what's on the billboards, what's on out of home, and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think with Critters you want to be figuring out every lunchbox and every keychain that gets put in it. So I think that there's definitely that. But we have to figure out a way to kind of make a cleaner accounting. I think of sort of
100%.
Of how your IP is exploited, et cetera.
Yeah, and every time a new technology comes out, we like to pretend that we have to reinvent the wheel, but it still comes down to don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. Be transparent. Those are foundational. That's what allows society to operate, and we can keep those principles in every new situation. So, beliefs can change, but values have to be consistent throughout. The value is don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. The belief about what that means can change. The belief about the way that works can change, but the foundational value is universal.
Well, and I also want to point out that a lot of times, when you use one of these generative AI tools, if you read their terms of service, they're
everybody here has done that, right?
Right. but literally it's saying to you, you shall not use it in these bad ways, you can't, you're responsible for figuring out if it works. Like, so if you use their thing and somehow you have an issue, you can't turn around and come back at them. You can't use their indemnification provision because they're gonna be like, you violated the terms of service because you did one of the things that we said you couldn't do. So the box that it lives in currently in the legal framework, right? I'm the lawyer, write the terms of service. I'm gonna write it where I put all of the compliance risk on you, even though we created the software.
And this happened with the VHS, the video with the Betamax recorder. This happened with Napster, with video games, everything. They always turn it around on you because they write the terms and conditions, and you have a choice, yes or no. You can agree to have an Apple phone. You click yes. You've agreed to 700 pages of terms and conditions. Why read it when you have no control or power over it? I don't read any of that because it's not worth the effort. It doesn't matter if I read it or not. I can't negotiate with the company.
I read them and I get mad.
It just pisses you. And then sometimes you find out that they say that it doesn't work in a zombie apocalypse, and that's funny. But that's it.
You know, the topic itself I find myself even getting confused about the difference between the ethics and the legal element of this conversation. Legal put aside for a second, because I think in a legal space, it's black and white for a little while, and then that moves. It's a lot of gray, but it moves. From an ethical perspective, is there an opportunity for all these platforms and all these companies to try and find a way to set a precedent, set a standard for what is ethical training, for what is correct compensation of the original art, the original sources? Is there a way for the industry to go that direction?
I think Ben's company has found a way to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, you can go on our website. We just posted kind of our, the CEO of Moon Valley and their head researcher kind of posted, I think, their thesis there. But there's a lot that goes into training a model. I think people just think that it's like you just feed it this like massive library of images, and then it just kind of like learns how to replicate enough pixels. There's actually like tons of individual utilities that are used. There's VLMs, which are used to just caption images. There's VAEs, which encode things into noise. There's all these tools. And so, our kind of, the mandate that we set out was to try to engineer from scratch all those individual utilities, using clean data. But the extent to which every piece of that has to be clean or whatever, I think is a decision that every company makes, and the degree of comfort that they have with kind of that level of. It's very expensive. That the flip side of it is that you need a lot of money to do that, to actually go out and license all that material, and so it's going to be challenging for smaller research teams.
Which is why they didn't do it.
Yeah. So I think that there's that's why I don't ever want to come off like we're the earnest ones here. Like, I think we did it because we want to go out and partner with big studios and big big groups that want to utilize AI in a way that doesn't. And in many cases, they're all working with musical artists or film and television artists, and so they want to make sure that their kind of their creative partners don't feel betrayed by the entities that are using them. But I think I think it comes down to that personal decision. If it's something that's being done because you're a young up and coming ML researcher at university and you really want to crack this one bit of tech, then your ethical decision there might change a little bit, because the purpose of it is to sort of explore a new frontier rather than to go out and make money.
Well, that's what they all want to rely on at the end of the day, is they just want to say it's fair use and it's transformative. And then the court is the one who tells you if it's fair use or transformative. And more, the court tends to favor companies and say, well, it's transformative, so it's fair use. And somebody somewhere is going to learn, so then must be educational, right? I mean, it's problematic.
I will say, too, that a lot of what we've done is actually tried to bring in as much of our artistic community into the conversation around how those elements are trained. And so, eventually we'd love to talk to every, the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild and the Animation Guilds, and kind of bringing those people into the conversations to set some sort of standards and probably work with other, model research teams. I don't think it can or should come monopolistically from one group. I think it needs to reflect kind of a coalition of voices that are both from the technological side and also from the creative communities. And so, we've set our own standards just so we could, set a company, policies for how we choose to interact with the models. But I think, there's going to be a moment where all need to come together and have leading voices in the creative communities that are all being impacted by this to set what those standards really are. Because we're just, I think we all took our best guess at what felt right, but I think that's going to be an evolving conversation.
Well, I think that's where you need to bring ethicists in at the foundation. There's a great company here in Austin called Hypergiant, and they have a chief ethics officer, and they have something called top of mind ethics, and they don't create anything that doesn't go through the framework of decision making, and every single creator has to say, where's the harm? Is there harm in something that I can create? What is that harm potentially? And is there a way to mitigate that harm? And so it's a balancing test. But what can we do at this level? Top of mind ethics. Right. Think about it.
The problem is you have people,
keep it in the mix.
You have people like that are doing the right thing, but then you also have like 100 people that are right now building AI models of someone like selling you shampoo online, and they're just going to be flooding us with the most vile crap we've ever seen, and they don't care. They're like, great, I'm going to AP just this, and I sold 84 more bottles of shampoo on this thing, so I'm going to put $1 million into this ad, and we're all going to like have to look at it.
So I'm not going to buy AIshampoobottle.com. I'm going to put that up this afternoon. All right, well, we actually have hit the end of the session. So we could continue the conversation, but the way we're going to do that is you're going to be able to talk to these wonderful folks out in the lounge. So please give them all a warm thank you very much for being here. Please welcome your panel. Give you a little space. All right. So this is, I believe, the last panel of the day. Is that correct? We saved the best for last? All right. So thank you for joining us. My name's Cory Treffiletti. We are here for the future of AI filmmaking. And apparently, if you've been here today, the future has a lot of zombies in it. So we're all screwed.
Everything
we're all
has
going to die.
zombies. Everything has zombies.
Everything has zombies. Now, we saw a lot of really great examples today, of what can be done with the tools that we have today. We've also, in the earlier session, we spoke about ethics and legal precedents and things that are going to affect the process and the ability to create the films, to extract the ideas from all these people's brains and put them down in some sort of video format. But today, for this session, we want to talk a little bit more about what the possible is. What can we expect? What do we hope to have happen? What changes does this portend for the industry itself? Because all of you are involved in one way or another in this industry, so what can you look forward to? And so I have these four wonderful human beings here who are not zombies, who are going to give us a little bit of insight, and we're going to allow them to talk about it. So I'll ask Verena, why don't you start on this end and just introduce yourselves, and we'll go.
Thank you so much. It's great that you all are here today to learn a little bit about AI, and please connect with us afterwards. My name is Verena Puhm. I come from traditional filmmaking, from TV producing and writing, and then ventured into AI about 1.5 years ago. First, I used it for imagery, and then as soon as the tools were actually ready and we're not just making backwards driving, morphing cars, I went into the video space. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And since then, it has been a roller coaster ride of amazing projects that I was lucky enough to be a part of. From projects that went to Project Odyssey, one at Curious Refuge, to just premiering at Sundance with a project with Secret Level with Jason Zada and Monica Monique, who you've met yesterday, I believe, and many more coming right now. And I'm excited to be here and to be with these folks.
Hello, hi. My name is Tuhin. I am leading design at Luma. My background is almost exactly the opposite of Verena's, in which I am not at all from filmmaking, but my background is from design and tech. And so that's kind of what I've been doing for the last 15 years. Currently, I'm at Luma. Past work includes working with Apple, Airbnb, and Facebook, along with a bunch of other startups. But AI has been part of my design journey I would say since 2013, 2012. This was when we were at Facebook and we were doing some like ML-based, natural language-based stuff on search. And since then, kind of as we've had anything new breakthrough in AI, have done it. And so now at this point, it is really fantastic to come to this moment where there's the tech aspect of it, but then there is media, storytelling, and all of these come together. And so it's fascinating to be part of this journey. So thank you for having me.
Hi, I am the opposite of you. I'm a very traditional filmmaker, director. I directed and wrote a film with Kevin Costner called Swing Vote. Then I directed a film called Jobs about Steve Jobs, and I've done TV. I did a show on Paramount Plus with McNulty called Graves that was nominated for a Golden Globe, and I ran a show called Why Women Kill on CBS, so I come from a very much traditional filmmaking, entertainment background, and became very interested in AI, not only where AI is, but where it's going, and the confluence and marriage between AI and more where I think it has to go with the traditional Hollywood system and the AI world, and how does that combine, and what does the future look like going forward, using the best of both worlds that have to sort of come together, I think.
Hi, my name is Amaru. If you saw my presentation, you know who I am. I'm a very, very passionate guy. I love technology, always had. My background is similar, something in between. I have 18 plus years of experience with VFX, animation, games, art-viz, VR, XR. Pretty much I've touched, I think, everything. Since I was working for Amazon for almost 6 years, AWS, and then my previous general manager started this amazing startup called GripTape, and he's like, come and join us. And I was like, yeah, because I saw the potential of AI, and I just want to, take this technology, merge with all the years of experience that I have, and yeah, produce some amazing content. Thank you.
So one topic I want to start with, and I'm going to throw it out to everybody. You can all take a stab at this one. But the promise of AI is that it kind of lowers the bar for being able to create film, to be able to get your ideas into video and to be able to do things because of the text to video and all the different elements that are there. Does that democratization have a positive or a negative effect potentially on the quality of the product that is going to be put out there? Does it make a glut of stuff that's not as high quality, or does it open up doors for people who have the ability to tell stories to do more in a faster time frame and to be even more creative?
Well, I think that with every technological advancement, you have a lot of content coming out. I think about when the phones were able to actually create videos. You can shoot something very, very easily. What happened was a lot of people shot movies. Some, were really good. Some maybe not so much. But people were able to try themselves out and see if they want to be filmmakers, right? So I think it's a very, very good development to just have a low level of entry of, okay, how am I doing this? Am I a storyteller? Am I a DP? And you don't have to buy a camera for thousands of dollars. So in the end, I personally think this democratization really helps people that might not have the access or the resources to see if this is a career they want to do, or if it's just a hobby. But anytime when the masses of people have access, I think it's a good thing, because it helps actually to, I don't know, like to make us feel like we have power over our own stories. And I think that was told earlier, was about indigenous stories, that like studios taking indigenous stories, telling them like who owns it because it's their stories. Well, if they don't have access to the tools and the millions and millions of dollars to produce something, the story is going to be told, but they're not going to be a part of it. So these tools like AI are actually making us all part of the storytelling process again.
I think it's absolutely a good thing. I feel like barrier to entry in most places is never a good thing. Like that shouldn't be the reason you shouldn't get to tell your story. I think it's also interesting to look at this from previous technological things that have happened. One can argue when blogging happened, well, anyone could now blog and write and tell their story. And in the beginning, of course, like, was everything, Pulitzer Award winner material? Probably not. But like, what it led to was a lot more people could tell their stories for the first time in their entire lives. That is very intertwined with social media, led to like multiple revolutions in our lifetime. But more importantly, over time, the material has its own life. It's a new medium, and a new medium is kind of born when that happens. And so we'll probably likely see the same stuff here, wherein TikTok is another great example. It's its own medium. Instagram, when it first came out, like, it was very easy to get to the trending or back then Explore page. Good luck trying to break through on Explore if you're a new content creator and you don't know what you're doing today. Because I feel like humans eventually find ways that makes their story unique. And with every medium, we find a different way. If something else becomes commonplace, we'll find something else that creates that structure. I don't think we can exist outside of it.
Right, right.
Yeah, I also think it's a good thing, and it'll also weed out those who can and who cannot. And that's with any medium ever. I am a screenwriter. I've had 200 people in my life, maybe more, give me a screenplay they've written, from a gardener to anybody. I mean, I've got a great story for you, they say, Would this make a good movie, they say, that kind of thing. And I think AI is a way to express your creativity, and those who actually push it to the next level and look for the stories that can affect and touch and go further will rise above those who can't. But in the end, I think it is sort of brilliant in that it allows you to live out and to visualize whatever you have going on in your head, whatever story you think you don't, as you were just saying, you don't need all of the tools that you might need otherwise, but you still need to sort of know what you're doing, because it really is, nothing is easy. And I think that's probably the misnomer of, for example, being given a script by somebody who says, I do this, won't this be great? And I've been doing it for 15, 20 years, and how hard it is to write a good movie. It is really going to be no different. But I think having the tools is a really positive thing.
I agree. There's a couple of things here that I would like to say. For me, AI is actually allowing me to discover new talents. And when I talk about talents, it's not necessarily like I know how to write or make a 3D model or make whatever it is. It's actually something that you're passionate about. Like, I can give you an example. When I was writing Pichu, the story that I wrote for AWS, for me it was a little bit of hell because, I had to write the story, which is not my language, right? I speak Spanish, that's my fluent language. And, I didn't have ChatGPT to help me out. It was my first time writing something. I always had passion for creating stories, but I was not an amazing writer per se. So it took me 2 months to write a 5-minute short film, and I had to go through different layers at Amazon. They had lawyers, sorry. They had to approve it. So it was a roller coaster for me. Just imagine if I can rewrite Pichu, I could probably do it much shorter, right? So it probably wouldn't be 2 months. So for me, it's I love what you said that democratizing and using this amazing technology in countries like, again, where I'm coming from, where we don't have these tools. And yes, there's going to be new people and new amazing creative minds that are going to create amazing, beautiful content. So, and I agree with you, it's not for everyone, but what I do like about this technology, it helps you find new talents.
Now, what about the flip side? So Joshua, I want to ask you this one. You said that you're the one probably up here who comes from the most traditional side of the business. How is Hollywood going to be able to handle this? Because there's going to be a lot more, to your point, content coming at them. Every gardener, everybody else might actually have the ability to pursue their story, put it together. Is Hollywood ready for that influx of new creativity?
Well, I can answer it in a roundabout way. First of all, it doesn't have a choice. And that's the evolution of anything. For us to think that this way of expression was going to remain static for 200 years is ridiculous. I think that Hollywood and the AI world are two different cultures, and I don't think they talk to each other very well. And I think that there's an existential anxiety that Hollywood has about AI, and conversely, AI is I personally think as selling the platform is terrible at marketing itself and terrible at selling the dream of what it should be and could be. Personally, I think that AI is like a play was, and then there was radio, and then there was TV, and then there was film, and then there was animated film, and then there was live action. AI is just another genre. It's an aesthetic that lives beside all of those. I personally think you need to sell it as that because that is what it is. It has its own feel, its own texture, and it's not, and it shouldn't be a threat. And in many ways, Hollywood is contracting right now. They're making so many fewer films. I mean, I'm in it right now. I'm pitching, I'm directing, but so few films, so few TV shows that you have writers that are out of work and actors are out of work. And there's such an opportunity because AI is not easy, and it's going to take a lot of that talent. We talk about writers and people who have screenplays, and you have AI filmmakers, you know, and sometimes the AI comes from the tech world, and they're not trained in formal storytelling that way. We should be sharing actors. I will say that my experience watching AI content very much is that you have to use voices. You have to, and through the voice, you get humanity. You need actors. You need, at least at this stage, in my opinion, because it's the only thing that is drawing us into the world of these characters. And when you, a lot of times I think the short AI film makes the mistake of not voicing it. It almost sounds like an international film that's been dubbed, you know, where you're the only, you know, but so there's so many ways that you can connect them. I think Hollywood is nervous about it. It's investing in it quietly. But I think there will be a moment when ambassadors like me and others who speak the same language, because one of the last thing I'll say on this is that when I hear people from AI companies who are doing generative AI and the films that they're making, they speak in almost algorithms and prompting and coding, and people in Hollywood speak inspirational and aspirational and the big picture and what's the emotion that's going to come out of it. And it's like, and yet they both want the same product to be consumed by the biggest audience you can. So I think there's work to be done on bridging those two worlds that kind of want to talk to each other, but they're, you know, as AI people like to say, they're the gatekeepers on one side, and as Hollywood likes to say, they're the existential threat on the other.
But, and Tuhin, I'm going to ask you this question, because you're from Luma, and I saw a lot of the work. Is AI just a trigger word right now? Because I watched that, there was all the films earlier, and the one was Kitsune. And Kitsune reminded me of the old Watership Down, the same animation from that old Watership Down cartoon. If you told me that was just an animated film, I'd have been great. If you tell me it's an AI animated film, I look at it differently. So is AI a trigger word that may actually help or hinder the ability to get some of this work to the finish line into people's faces?
I would say at this stage, no. I think eventually for it to truly be embraced by all the filmmakers, it will have to dissolve. But I think like anytime something new comes about, it needs its own identity, even if that might make some people uncomfortable, because that becomes the wedge with which it's a moniker. Oh, it is an AI film. It lets you, first and foremost, judge it because, can it even do that? And then, you know, after like a year, 2 years, 3 years, when you're not noticing all the subtle things, the physics that's off, the emotion tears, like 5-tier droplets falling, all of that stuff, once that has dissolved, so will the word. It's like media and social media are now one thing, but when they started, they were not. To the point that actually like individual media is trumping all of these things. And so like, it's kind of like that for me, I think, from my perspective, which is, it is, for sure, it is a trigger word. I think like in whatever creative discipline, be that filmmaking, be that programming, be that designing, everyone has that a little bit of like, wait, is it gonna come for our jobs? But then I think like echoing kind of what you said, end of the day, if someone else can now say a bunch of words and get a shot or, you know, eventually a film out, well, yeah, so can the best filmmakers in the world. Who do you think is going to use that better? And so I think, like, at that point, yeah, the AI part is meaningless. But for now, it makes it a vehicle. It's a little bit like Tailwind, and I would say it has more power than it has negatives.
Quickly, I'll just say to that, on one of my first films, we were only using film. I had a cinematographer, and they were just going into digitized camera, like the Red and the Alexa, if you know anything about film cameras. And he was saying, I'm never going to use that. It's never going to happen. Like, literally, you know. Like, there was no world that Technicolor just folded, you know. I mean, and it became the world, of course, you see it. There's resistance, but once you understand that it is a tool with its own aesthetic. For example, we are still trying to make these digital movies today look like film. But once you understand the tool, people get less afraid of it.
But really, let's just go back one step. What makes it an AI film? Is it that you used it for all of the visuals or a portion of the visuals? Because of that, you could use it for the storyboarding, you could use it for the audio. I mean, you can use it for almost all the individual elements of the film. It doesn't have to be the entirety of the film. I saw some good examples earlier today that were a combination of live action and animation with AI. So what makes it actually an AI film at that point?
I think a partial integration, you know, we call hybrid, but it is an AI film. And then any integration, if it's audio-driven or a video, is considered an AI film. If you, let's say you do your storyboard with AI, or you let ChatGPT or whichever other tool help you write the script, and then you shoot it all in a traditional way, I don't think, like, I would not consider that an AI film. It's definitely AI supported, because you use the tools to make it happen. But what you see on screen was not created by AI, so for me, technically, it doesn't fit in there. But in whichever way you used it, if it's visually or auditively, then it will be considered either a hybrid or a fully AI integrated film.
I think for me, it's like the video part. Like, if like 60-70% of the workflow and you almost have replaced for 60-70% of the footage a real world camera, that to me is like the closest like defining line of like, oh yeah, I would call that AI film.
Amaru, what about the impact on the jobs? Because we're talking about, in many, many categories, people are talking about AI replacing people's jobs. I'm one of those few people who doesn't think it's going to replace them, but it's going to change a lot of them. So does it create more jobs in this category than it removes? Like, what's the potential impact?
Well, it's a great question. I have a few thoughts on that. I think, like, the way that I see things, I could be wrong. But, so, it seems like we're going to need less people to create something, right? So let's just say that we have a shot of, I don't know, I'm just making numbers, a 10-minute shot, which is almost impossible, but let's say. And you need 100 people right now, or like before AI. Now, maybe, yes, you still need humans, you still need our creative minds, but maybe you need 50% less, so it's like 50 people, right? So I think, like, but if you see those metrics, you're going to say, yes, this is going to, like, affect our industry. But because you need less people to do more, I think, like, smaller studios are going to start, like, to merge, right? So maybe, like, Hollywood and, like, bigger production studios are going to need less people, but then you have more, like, little ones, and they're going to start producing more stuff. That's one part of it. And the second point for me is that new roles for me are going to start to merge as well. And even, like, current roles, like in my case, for instance, before I joined GripTape, I didn't know what Python was. It's a language that you can code things, sure. And I joined GripTape, and after 3 months using ChatGPT, Claude, like different, in my team, I ended up actually creating AI agents. I'm like, okay, this is actually interesting. I just discovered a new talent. Oh, I can actually make some tools that will help me create my art. So I think, like, more roles also starting to merge and becoming new ones, if that makes sense.
I feel like the common misconception is that you only need one person to make an AI movie. And I mean, you can do that, but it's going to take you a long while, and you're going to be exhausted, probably not sleep. I've done it before. It's fun until, but you need a team. It's not a solo sports. So yes, there's going to be some positions that are pretty similar. Todd to what was out there, like producers. However, those producers have to understand the new process and the new workflows. So they're more like post-producers, visual effects producers, those type of producers. You will have AI artists. You have still visual effects artists because, as you all probably know, if you've opened one of those tools, there's a lot of hallucinations and crazy stuff happening. You're like, oh my God, but this shot is perfect if it wasn't for this. And then there's people that can fix this. Like in real life, when you're shooting something and there's something off in the street and you want to get rid of that street lamp or whatever. So, and then, lip sync or actors, artists that actually bring the emotion and the performance to the lip sync. There's definitely a lot of spots that can be filled and new roles are being created and old roles that are being taken with us, but you still have to adapt. You still have to learn something new because the process is different than where we were coming from.
Yeah. I also don't think it's and I may be totally naive here, but I don't think it's a replacement. I think it's just something new. It's its own category, however you want to say that. AI is its own category. I don't think there's any reason from what I've seen, even looking at your little short bits of it, why there shouldn't be a short animated, we say it's animated, but totally generated through AI, AI film nominated for an Oscar. There's no reason that shouldn't necessarily exist. It's its own thing that has its own peculiarities and how now what the future says of it, I'm not sure. But I think for the near future, I think it really is its own thing. And also, maybe coming from it a little bit more on the outside, it has its own aesthetic. It just does. It has its own representation of humans and its own representation of a lot of things that's so interesting and inviting. It's different, and I think that it's just a new way of storytelling.
Yeah, but we saw even today, there are examples where you can take that new visualization, those tools, and you can still convey emotion without having the same facial emotional features that a human being shows. You can still create emotion, and you can still tap into an audience and get them to feel something that's resonant, can't you?
Yeah, of course. I think kind of a little bit of some of the points that you were raising. I think all of the visual oddities that we see today are, I would give them months.
Yeah, they're temporary.
Months. I'm not even talking years. I think each of those, if those are the reasons we want to carve out a separate category, are going to go away with 100% certainty. Of all the things, nobody knows the future, but this is a very clear arc. So that's not the reason why I think we should make it a separate category. I do also echo the point I think that you were raising in that, yes, there will be some job, I would say, replacement. But at the same time, I really think of this as an agency thing. Yeah. At the same time, you do have the opportunity to actually, not quite a one-person studio, but yeah, maybe a 10-person studio. Mm-hmm. It's not impossible anymore. And you could be in a very specialized role. And to those people, what I would say is that I think what this new era, whether it's contained or whether it goes through all of filmmaking, allows for is basically you have a deep skill set. And then you become a generalist of sort in everything else. But as long as you have that deep skill set, you can amplify that a lot. And then you can use AI, honestly, as a tool, as an amplifier, to amplify that part, because that thing you know really well. And then, as you picked up, you will pick up everything else, and you will be sort of a generalist. Maybe not the best in the world, but combined with the thing that you're actually really, really deep in, yeah, the whole package is going to be actually very unique in the world. And that's the lens with which to look at all of this.
Do you also think that there's an opportunity for filmmakers in this space to start to learn new tools and new skills for things like distribution and to some extent marketing and understanding their audience as well?
Absolutely. I know I'm sitting in an audience that talks about films and is very deep in film, but I cannot not mention the parallels of the question and the way, because there is filmmaking and AI in filmmaking. But then there's also AI. And that is affecting every single domain in, I kid you not, literally the same ways. Like, I'm a designer. There are tools out there where you can just say things and get a design. And on me, like, the thing is, okay, what else do I need to learn? Okay, I can probably start vibe coding now and talk to Claude and Cursor and get something done. I can probably pick up some of the sales and marketing side of things now. And will I be the best in the world at those things? No. But I will probably be better than where I'm today because the tools will amplify some of those capabilities and I'll pick up the rest. And so it's exactly the same. Like, if you're curious, again, don't do it just because you have to, but if you're actually curious about these things, and this is something that you want to get deeper on, learn about these peripheral things, and you'll go very far.
Yeah. Gives you more control over the finished output and the ability to connect it to an audience, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain shock and awe era that AI is in right now. You know, the first film that was ever made was in 1836 by Lumiere, and it was a train coming into a station, which you might know about, and there was an audience sitting in there, and they had never seen it before. It was new, and they all screamed, and they all ran out, right? Within 1 month, they were used to it, and they were saying, well, who's on the train? What's going on? What's the relationships? Now, let's jump forward to this movie, Dune 2, that I saw last summer, and there was a scene with a sandworm, and there was Timothée Chalamet on this worm, and the test was he going to fall off or not? And I knew how that sequence was created. It was like $15 million. It's about a year and a half in the pipeline from visual effects artists from all around the world, South Korea to Canada to the United States. But all I cared about in the audience was whether Timothée Chalamet was going to stay on that worm, meaning that in the end, the success of the medium is that all the things that we're shocked we can even do go away. And an audience is engaged in a character and what is going on with the character and the story that that character is going through. Another quick example of that is, I remember when Pixar was beginning, and in the mid-'80s, and the first little Pixar was Luxor Jr., which was the lamp. And they did something very, very smart, because with the technology they had, they knew they could only really do some things like shapes and lamps, but it was about a father and a child, right? And you instantly were emotionally connected to it. And then they had this whole dream of a movie, and they were going to do it. It was called Toy Story. But at the time, just like AI has its anomalies and its inability to really do certain things well, digitized animation did as well. It could not do mouth movement very well or expressions. It couldn't get hair at all. Water, forget it. But they were going to do Toy Story. So they decided what they could do was shapes. They could do the hard lines of toys. And they did the movie. And anytime that little boy ran through and his face looked weird and the mouth looked weird, it didn't matter. You were focused on the toys. But the story was emotional. It was about the loss of childhood. It was about the imagination of a child that gets left behind in the toys that loved him. Now imagine how emotional that is. And on some level, it understood, as I think AI needs to understand, the AI generative, that you have to dive into the emotion of characters and relationships for the audience that consumes the movies that we see the same way it's consumed every kind of entertainment, since the first play to the first TV show. You have to be engaged in what is going on. And when I talk to writers and even AI creators, I'm like, what is the emotional moment like they had in that Toy Story? How can your story meet the technology where it is right now and find out the kinds of things you can generate without being too ambitious, but with something that connects an audience? Like when I saw your thing today, it was about this little child holding a baby, I'm assuming a sister, or yeah, on the back. I didn't know anything about the story, nothing. Instantly connected to that. It's really important to find what the humanity in these stories are, because that is what the buy-in from an audience will eventually be. And the first AI sort of film, like Toy Story was the first digitized animated film that does that. It will just be the floodgate, but it will come through the emotion of the characters.
1000% agree. I love your analogy with the Pixar. You know, Pixar, yeah, they couldn't do hair, so they stuck with, plastic toys. Yeah. And it's beautiful. Same with Avatar. Like, James Cameron had this vision, like, even before of the first movie, and, he was waiting for the right technology, which, by the way, now he's part of the board of Stability AI, right? So the fact that you have this technology doesn't mean that it's not worth it. I think it's 100% worth it. I do want to say something though before I forget. Is that okay? So we were talking about new roles and how roles could be merging, and we talk about how we as professionals we have years of experience, right? And AI is enhancing those years of experience. But what about the new artists, people who are actually graduating today? What's going to be, how does the world look like for them? And I think it's, in my point of view, it's our responsibility to embrace these new generations, because they're going to probably become prompt artists, maybe, but some actually still like to do 3D modeling and texturing and lighting. So, I think it's, our responsibility to educate them, and also the new studios and schools. I think schools should be adopting this type of generative AI tools, because they need to prepare the new generations to do what is going on right now.
Oh my God, I wanted to add so much. I don't know where to start.
Add away.
Well, to your question earlier about emotion, and I mean, you just brushed on it. The most important thing for me, at least coming from traditional filmmaking, is to have an appealing story. Yeah. And if you have an appealing story, you can transport it in any medium. And if my visuals are not good, if you transport it with audio, with sound, with music, you can still create an amazing story. So it always goes down to story. And a funny thing about AI is that epic trailers are easier to produce than something like this. 2 people in a room, in a kitchen, talking to each other, much harder to create than the biggest, Star Wars-esque trailer. The character consistency, the background consistency, the lip sync, the emotions, all of that is really, really hard. So if you see those kind of movies coming out, there's so much more that gotten into that than you would ever imagine. And that is where the craft lies, but also the art lies. And then if the story is great, it just transports you. I watched several of those movies, and what I really loved was that there was so much human experience in the movies. So yes, it's made by AI, but it's made by people through AI. It's still human expression and human experience and human hope and love and hate and all the emotions that we have that are being transported. And that's why we connect.
Yeah, I'll both echo your point. I feel like the fundamentals will always matter. Kind of going back to your point that you raised about new grads, same thing. The fundamentals will always matter. Sure, the way you do might change. Again, people went from coding in assembly to much, much higher level abstractions of language to now coding in English. But the fundamentals still matter. If you run into issues, you still have to go all the layers down with the fundamentals. So in this case, the story, the human connection. This is another thing that people mention all the time or ask all the time. Oh, will we get AI agents that can create whole stories and whole movies? Yeah, maybe, but they wouldn't be interesting to watch. The story is a deeply, deeply personal perspective of the world. And it's either your experience or a witnessed experience or an imaginary experience, but it is deeply, deeply personal. This is not one of those things that you can just offload to a machine. And I don't mean this in creative sense. I mean this in what connects with other people sense.
It's the soul. When we had this previous call, it was all about the soul that comes up and the ability to go tell a story.
Yep.
And it comes from it comes in your experience in Ecuador, it's the same tenets of storytelling that have always existed. And that also includes things that I have noticed as a tendency in AI filmmaking, which is a tendency general in storytelling, which is editorializing. There is a want to do a dream fever moment because it's so cool and you can do it. And it may be tangentially related to your story, but it just is so crazy. And sometimes the discipline of keeping on the simple story you're telling that you mean to tell, and being able to, as we say, sort of in the editorial room, throw out your sort of your babies, which means the things you loved, in sort of an attempt to create the simplicity, because as you were talking about these trailers, there's a very big ambitious thing. It is easier, I think, to do the big Star Wars moment with battleships blowing up and, you know, Captain, we have a problem moments, than it is to do the soft, emotional moments that in the end are the things that are going to take you over the finish line with this technology in the end, because you really want that. That's what, you know, why are you doing it? Is it to show off what you can do by prompting, or is it to show off a story you've been wanting to tell, and it's just by the fact that you happen to be doing it by prompting? And I mean, there is that is inherently important, because in the end, that's what's going to translate.
Another simplest way to say this, AI will always be the how, it will never be the what.
So, okay, that's a really interesting place to go for a second, because I'm a marketer, and in marketing we talk about the art and science of marketing all the time. And what you're all kind of touching on is the art and science of filmmaking. And I'm really curious because you mentioned, for example, as I drop all my papers, no, don't worry about them. I get it all memorized. As you're talking about the 5 tears coming out of their eyes, et cetera. You know, that's a science restriction. How long do you think it's going to be before the AI allows us to create what you actually have in your mind from the artistic perspective? Like, how far away from it doing what you actually want it to do?
Not so far off.
I wouldn't think too far off. Like, if I were being aggressive, I would say 6 months, play safe, a year.
Really? That quickly, you believe? Yeah. Well, you guys down there.
Well, I would temper that by saying that I think from my perspective, it's pretty close, but it's not close for certain genres. Like, you know, I saw somebody try to do a romantic comedy. Now, here's the problem with romantic comedy in AI. Romantic comedy, even in live action, is 100% dependent on human chemistry. It just is. The best script in the world, the best cinematography in the world will not matter if Julia Roberts is not getting along with Nick Nolte in that movie that they did. It just will not matter. There are moments that I think are further off, in my opinion, and there are also genres that are very, very close. And I think, you know, that's where there has to be some curation of ideas, and for companies to really be focusing on the things that when you get to that 6-month mark that you can really, because one thing I'll say is a human being has a visceral response to something. We've all seen it when we see now, with advanced as digitized and computerized animals are, let's say, like a lion on a screen. And you know that's a computerized lion, right? You know that's not a real lion. I'll go back and say, when I first saw Alien, the movie, I had a professor, and they were saying it was scary because even though it's a movie, Sigourney Weaver was in a room with the alien. You knew it, you felt it. And then David Fincher did an Alien, and they were all computerized aliens, and you weren't as scared for some reason. You did not feel, as a human consuming this entertainment, the tension and the fright, just because you subconsciously understood that. So when AI can jump that subconscious barrier we have with what is real and human and mammally and, you know, and visceral, that is when that's when the whole game changes completely. But I think as far as it representing things, I think we are pretty close.
You know, to that point though, at what point does VFX end and AI begin? Weirdly, what's the overlap between the two? Because you're talking about things that can probably be done one way or the other, or maybe through a combination of both.
I was just having that thought. That's great. I mean, we did touch base about you know, what does it make an AI movie, like you were asking. What does a 3D movie make it 3D? You know, I have this argument with my close friend. At that time, that was like 5 years ago, and I'm like, so what do you do for a living? I am a 3D artist at that time. He's like, so you make 3D films? I'm like, yeah, I'm working on a 3D film. It's on the computer. And he's like, but that's a 2D TV. Yeah, but it's a 3D film. It's like the style is called 3D. And he's like, no, that's not 3D. I need to put my glasses and actually see it in 3D. So the perception of him even though that's, okay, so you're telling me what do I do for a living, because I can argue with you, I guess. So it's almost like, it's just the perception. Like, if you have a BFX shot, and the BFX, I think I showed that on my demo, where you have like a real live action footage, and then you use generative field to, I don't know, create an asset. Does it make it AI? Or is it still BFX shot? And then if I have a real actor in front of the camera, I think, like, for me, it's going to be tricky to tell what is what. And like you were saying, like, Hollywood is actually doing this under the hood already. So I don't know. I'm still like trying to actually really comprehend what defines what.
But the other thing is, quickly, let me give you an example of what this is. Visual effects are extremely expensive, and they take forever. So I have a movie right now that I'm working on, and it's set in the 70s, and it's just, I wanted to see Memphis in the 70s, a big shot. Now, this is just a big visual effect shot, a lot of, it was something like, the quote was $100,000 for one shot, of which there had to be many shots because it was a pretty expansive shot. It was only one shot, and the time pipeline was a very, very long time. When I do, if I'm doing a very basic, let's say there's a burn-in in a TV or something, that might be $15,000. It's an area that I think, I don't know what it actually is going on, but I will tell you one thing. If there's the door that opens Hollywood to the filmmakers that are really kind of pushing back on AI, this is someplace that I think is going to start to slowly become part of the equation quicker than almost anything else, because it's very expensive and it takes a very long time, any visual effect, almost at all.
Yeah, but there's the opportunity for a visual effects artist to learn AI, to actually do some processes faster if you don't have to, I don't know, like rotoscope anymore, because you can just click on a button. It's like, oh, I just saved 5 hours of my day. That's great. I'm going to go for a coffee.
I don't think I've met a single artist who likes rotoscoping. So
exactly,
yes.
exactly. So then it becomes like, if you are a visual effects artist, use those tools to help you to be a better visual effects artist that is powered by AI.
So there's an interesting, to tie this all back in towards where we started, is if we're talking about the future of filmmaking, and we're talking about AI as a big key component of that, there seems to be there's two different distinct places. There's the entire category of AI film, which is in many ways very similar to an animated category right now, but is obviously going to move towards a more hyper-realistic environment later. And then there's the utilization of AI to dramatically improve basically the margins, the profitability, the timelines to be able to get these things created from your brain onto some sort of video format. Can they stay separate? Are we talking about two distinct ways that AI will affect the future of filmmaking, or are we actually talking about them all eventually converging into one place?
Probably at some point it's going to be one place. I'm going to say this.
You say one place, what do you mean by that?
Well, is there a world where basically every movie is going to be an AI movie in some way, shape, or form because the visuals will be somewhat created in that style?
I don't think so. You go ahead.
Well, I mean, maybe if visual effects and AI become more and more closer, then probably every film will have some sort of
Except the rom-coms.
Except
We're not getting those.
I do want to say something. You might disagree with this, but I still don't think AI right now is style. Sorry. For me, AI is a tool. And so if you saw what I did with, like a 3D animated look of this character that I created with AI. But obviously, there's a lot of stuff under the hood that I did as an artist to make that character, because it's not only AI. I use a bunch of different extra tools. But looks like a 3D render. So let's just say that I create this film, right? Like the one that I want to create, and it looks like it's like Pixar. I wouldn't characterize that as a AI film. I would say that's a 3D film because it looks like 3D. So for me, I still don't think like AI still is like a style per se. Sorry, that's what I think.
No, I mean, and we may disagree a little bit there in the sense that I think you're right. You can manipulate the style. But when we talk about the photorealistic sort of stuff, which is what I think you were saying, I don't know. My feeling is maybe, but in a very long time. And that is because I think it's been decades and decades and decades since the 80s when we're trying to create, as I was talking about, these computer animated animals, let's say. And we all know when we're watching it, if the shot is longer, we're also talking now not about shorts, because your sort of the bar you're setting is a 2.5-hour film that's going to have the same effect as Oppenheimer. Right. That it's going to have the same effect as any movie we saw this year that won an Academy Award, right? So, Anora, for example. That's the premise of what you're saying. And I think it has to do with one of two things. What's our expectation of feeling that humanness? Because can AI, can it get that? Now, when they first digitized, I remember when they first digitized instruments for orchestras. This is going way back, right? Now we're talking at the beginning of digitization. But the one thing it really had a hard time was wind instruments. And the reason it couldn't was because of the breath. It couldn't get the when you were playing a wind instrument. Something felt really wrong. Strings they could kind of get, and the question I don't know. I don't think anybody fully knows. It's what Hollywood fears, but it's not. Is can it achieve that to the point where you are as engaged in this human story as you would be if I saw Moonlight, except digital. The answer, knowing where we are now and seeing how amazing things look now, is potentially yes, but I think it's quite a while, though I may be wrong.
I mean, the question is, again, then what do you define an AI movie? Because if you have movies that are traditional film but are going to be dubbed in a different language with AI tools, and then we're also going to change the lips according to whichever language you want to be it in, is that an AI movie in that particular language?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
That's also a case where actual AI dubbing with lip sync is already better than just voice dubbing. And so this is where there's a lot of...
What do you mean by that?
I mean you have someone who has completely different phonemes when they're talking in a different language. Right. But when you actually just add in the voice element, it's not the same. Add in the lip sync element, and suddenly you are this much closer. It's almost the same argument you had of how that feeling of oh yeah, that feels real. And it's closer to that because every time I watch a dubbed movie, I'm the illusion just breaks to the point that I would watch it in the foreign language with captions on.
I agree with you.
So that's what I mean. It gets just a little closer.
Well, you have that tool on your thing with expressions.
Right. But I mean, one quick thing. So let's just say that Pixar decides to make Toy Story 10, just make something up. And every single character has been 3D model, rigged, and you have a real animator doing all the emotions and everything looks beautiful. But all the backgrounds have been generated by AI. So what is it then? Is a 3D film? Is an AI? Is merged? So that's why I don't think right now, maybe in the future, yes, but I don't think right now AI style is just a tool that's trying to create whatever is in your head.
Yeah. So do you think that there is, and I'm asking you three, is there a version right now which is cross-platform, regardless of what platform you're using to generate it, where it generates a human face with a very particular vibe to it, I would say, an aesthetic to it that is very real and human, but there is a sheen to the skin. There is a texture that feels, in the most photorealistic AI moment, not a photo, okay? Because sometimes a photo can be very deceptive, but in the movement of an AI character, it feels like that, and it's not an unpleasant thing, but it feels like something particular, or am I wrong?
But the same thing happens with CGI. You have even Star Wars, one of the films, so many, I've lost my track, but they recreated one of the characters because they passed away. Sorry, I forgot the name.
Rogue One.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, that's CG. I can tell. Maybe my friends couldn't, but I was like, yeah, that's totally CG. It's actually, it's not the greatest, to be honest. Okay, thank you.
So here's what we're going to do.
Okay.
This is where it's getting really good. So we're going to have the cliffhanger. These four are going to run to the lounge, and you're all going to talk to them and pepper them with more questions.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, that was it. We're actually overtime now.
Right
so
when it
we're going to give them a round of applause for being so amazing.